right, it's just gone 1 a.m. Thank you very much for staying with us here on SABC News. I'm Flo Ladwaba. All across South Africa, IEC officials are counting your votes in the country's 6th democratic elections. Over the next hour, we'll be crossing live to our team of reporters for the latest results. But first, let's welcome the rest of our team then for this morning. Arabile Kumete and Simpiwe Ngongwane, who are joining us from the Rock in our Pretoria studios. Good morning, team.
Good morning to you, Flo. Of course, things certainly beginning to heat up. A few results even coming in. We'll, of course, have some rolling coverage for you when it comes to the situation here at the Results Operations Center. And as you mentioned, of course, my colleague Simpiwe Ngongwane is on the floor as well, giving us the latest with regards to things that are happening here at the ROC. I'll cross over to him now. Simpiwe, the sentiment down there, how's that looking right now?
Hi, Arabile. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Globe on SABC News. We're coming to you live from the floor of the IEC Results Operations Center. Well, it is relatively subdued. I see that so many of the party agents are staring at the leaderboard as the results start to trickle in. Well, what an eventful day it has been, and almost incident-free. Well, that's according to the IEC. Well, the IEC repeatedly, reiterated how happy they are with the smooth progress with regards to the entire voting process, apart, of course, from the various incidents across the country, which have been attributed partly due to the inclement weather, for instance, and some of the big issues perhaps was the issue of some of the voting stations failing to open, which the IEC has blamed partly to some of the service delivery protests and inaccessibility. Well, just analyzing at the low voter turnout, early analysis shows that the turnout has been very, very low, particularly at the townships. For instance, I spoke to a group of young men and women at the voting station where I did cast my vote today, and they blamed service delivery and definitely said that they will not be voting. We'll definitely be monitoring the leaderboard as the results are slowly trickling in, and we'll be chatting to some of the political party leaders and political party agents who are on the floor. But for now, Arabile, it's back to you.
Yes, Imperial, we'll delve into all of those issues across, of course, this morning as we track in and track just exactly how things are faring across the country. As you noted there, of course, the results beginning to trickle in, but Flo will certainly continue to give you an update with regards to how things are going. Back to you, Florence Letwaba, back, of course, in the Auckland Park studio, and we'll be back with you a little bit later.
All right, thank you very much there to Arabile. We're going to be crossing shortly to the Eastern Cape, where Asanda Beja is standing by. Well, the Independent Electoral Commission is assuring South Africans about the overall integrity of the polls. This follows allegations of double voting in some areas. The Commission was briefing the media at the Results Operations Center in Pretoria. IEC Commissioner Mosotho Moyabia says there are several layers of security to prevent electoral fraud.
The layers of security include: 1, the voters' roll, which only allows registered voters to vote and only allows for a single registration per voter. 2, the requirement for voters to produce a valid ID document before they vote. 3, the scanning of ID documents prior to voting. 4, the marking of a voter stamp with ink. May I say indelible ink. 5, the completion of a form containing the details of voters and the signing of a sworn declaration by voters where they vote at a voting station at which they are not registered. 6, party agents and observers monitoring all aspects of the voting, the counting, and the results capturing processes. 7, an inbuilt system-based exception report or reporting process for which various tolerance levels have been set. These exception reports are very well known to all of our political parties and the media as we provide these reports. And lastly, we capture these results and keep them on our systems in a scanned format where they can be recalled individually. All of these leave a detailed footprint of voter participation in the process and can be used both separately and in combination to identify instances of electoral fraud.
Well, the first voting station to announce its results came in exactly an hour ago. The IEC says electoral officials have completed vote counting at the Mvomvo Lodge voting station in Umzimvubu region in the Eastern Cape. It says that the ANC won 11 votes out of a total of 24. Let's take you to the Eastern Cape now, where our reporter Asanda Beje joins us from the IEC Results Operations Centre in East London. Asanda, good morning to you. Tell us about those early results that are trickling in.
Welcome to the Operations Centre right here at East London. We've asked to talk about what has been happening throughout the province. We are joined by our analyst, Jolene Steyn-Kotte, but we will be chatting to her a bit later in this segment where we're talking about the Eastern Cape. For now, when we look at what has been happening in the province throughout this day, earlier in the day we had a report from the IEC that villagers at Nhlangano and Dabankulu had decided that they would not be participating in this year's election. 591 people were registered to vote there, but decided that they would not participate. The MEC for Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Fikile Klasa, flew into that area to try and negotiate with the community, but they were adamant they would not vote. Now, that's not the only area in this province that has had problems. At Matatiele, also in the Eastern Cape, there was a surface delivery protest where communities were protesting about housing, sanitation, access to clean water, and other public service issues. Now, our colleague Atule Joga was in the Matatiele region, and he compiled this report for us.
This polling station has 121 registered voters. Only 2 people cast their ballot. The rest of the village abstained.
Okay. Our main problem here at home is that we really suffer in water matter. We really need water here. They promised us that they will find a way how we find water here around in our rural area. And they promised us the toilet, of which they told us there is money for the toilet, there is money for the water, as they are doing in other places. They are busy working on the water matter, but they are not doing it in a way that they were supposed to do.
Attempts to persuade disgruntled residents to vote failed. The municipality responded to complaints about water.
Yes, I said it's not true that in the last 25 years nothing was done in Ward 15. I said this is the second project. We had a water registration project that was implemented across the villages of Ward 15 under Chief Libenya, but the scheme collapsed simply because it was vandalized by the same community. Then coming to your question now, I had said there is a contract on site by the name of Amadwala who's doing registration in 2 villages. Then before the end of this month, we are going to appoint the service provider who's going to finish the work that was started by Annex, the service provider that we had terminated our services with them. Then we had agreed simply because we had lost MIG allocation due to non-spending as the district. In our turnaround strategy, we agreed that all the projects that we are going to implement in the next financial year, all their procurement processes should be concluded before the end of this financial year. I then committed to him that I can safely say by July work will be starting in 15.
There was also a community protest in a nearby village. Atule Joka, SABC News, Matatiya.
Now, as mentioned earlier, we are joined by analyst Jolene Steyn-Putter to talk to us a bit about some of the service delivery protests that have been taking place in the province. Now, Jolene, service delivery protests are not new. They've been happening throughout the years, but there's been a particular spike as we get closer to elections. We've had service delivery protests over the past 2 days when special voting was taking place. What do you make of this, where communities are now protesting against their right to vote?
I don't necessarily think it's a question of communities protesting against their right to vote. I think what we are looking at, especially if we look at the socio-economic demography of the areas in which these protests are taking place, we're at the 25 years of democracy mark, and in many cases there has been a lack of development or underdevelopment in those areas. So I think you are looking more at communities trying to find some form of agency or voice in order to get attention for the particular issues that they deal with, which are basic issues of water, issues of sanitation, roads, for example, and then one can take it further and start looking at education and health provision as well.
Earlier in the day, the MEC for Cooperative Governance flew into Dabankulu, where a community was saying we will not participate in this election, to negotiate with them and try to get them to vote, where he was saying, what are your issues? And they were talking about roads, water, and he was saying we have processes in place to deliver this. Do you think those negotiations maybe came too little too late?
I think it's not necessarily the negotiations coming too little too late, but rather a question of service delivery, basic service delivery coming too late. We have to remember that these are areas that are predominantly ANC electoral support. The ANC tends to get anything between 83 to 89, in some elections 90% of the vote. So these are strategically very important areas, and this for me is a form of communities exercising their power to try and hold the ruling party in the province accountable for not necessarily delivering on that dream of democracy of a better life.
We're going to have the discussion further about exercising the right to vote. Another group of people that also exercised their right to vote today are inmates who are at the East London prison right across the Buffalo River at West Bank. Our colleague Janine Lee spent the morning there as they voted. Let's take a look at that insert.
Placing 240 prisons throughout South Africa today, with 11,000 prisoners registered to vote. But at each election venue or voting station, there's always a sniffer dog to sniff out contraband. And here at the prison in East London, it was no exception. So let's have a chat to this little guy who's one of the sniffer dogs. What's your name? Ah, his name's Fritz. Fritz, how long have you been doing this job? Ah, since 2013. And do you enjoy it?
It's going all right.
Yep, Fritz enjoys the job, but he says to me what he enjoys more is working for the reward after the job, and that's a ball. Fritz, should we ask your handler if he can give you a reward, seeing you have done a bit of work this morning? Good, love that. Okay, he's going to love that. Let's have a look. There you go. All work and a bit of play. But have a look what happened today during the course of the morning in the maximum prison here in East London. 245 prisoners voted, and it was smooth sailing. Take a look.
It was a steady stream of voting prisoners at the East London Maximum Security Correctional Facility. Voting took place under the watchful eye of party agents, warders and IEC on hand to make sure voting flowed smoothly. The low registration figure of inmates has been attributed to the fact that many leave their ID books with their families for safekeeping. Others cannot afford the 140 rand needed when applying for an ID book at Home Affairs. While most inmates were excited to vote, they were not aware that there were 26 parties contesting the election in the Eastern Cape and 48 contesting nationally. Janine Lee, SABC News, East London.
Well, that group of people is not the only group of people that got to vote in the Eastern Cape today. Whilst Janine was at the prison, we also took a drive around East London to talk to other people who had just voted, to get an idea of what they would want to see happen differently. Most people spoke about jobs, the need to create jobs, but also the need to improve public services, your roads, your water, your healthcare. As we mentioned earlier, we are with our analyst, Jolene Steyn-Kotze. Jolene, the first round of results have come through for the Eastern Cape at Nzivubu. Talk to us about why that particular area is important.
Well, you know, I think that particular area speaks a lot to the challenges that communities who are engaged in almost boycotting the vote and protesting, so to speak. You know, you're looking at an area, for example, that is in the Alfred Nzo municipality. In 2016, that particular municipality was found to be one of the worst places to live by the Deprivation and Comfort Index developed by the South African Institute of Race Relations. If you look at the Mzimvubu community in particular, predominantly female-headed households at 57%, 70% of people are in informal employment, so you're sitting with a high level of vulnerability. Only 31% of people, 31% of people, for example, get water from a river instead of having running water in a house, and 86% only have a pit toilet, not necessarily a flushing working toilet inside the home. You know, and one can carry on and break down the socio-economic profile of what this community looks like. And that speaks to, we are still sitting with some of the same challenges 25 years into our democracy.
Does that speak to some of the issues or some of the reasons why some communities have been protesting today and saying we will not take part in this anymore?
No, definitely. I think, you know, as much as the Premier had highlighted that there are formal processes, you know, you're looking at a ward committee representation, for example, to try and get these issues on the table. And for some reason, there seems to be a disconnect between communities, their representatives, and almost delivering the goods at the end of the day. So it's not surprising that communities are now starting to work outside those processes because they feel maybe their voice is not being sufficiently heard.
But Jolene, why is there a disconnect when you have a ward councillor, when you have a mayor, when you have an MEC, you have a premier, you have a national minister, and you have a president? There's so many layers that people should be able to be in touch with their government. Why is there this disconnect?
You know, we're also looking at a very factional ANC. So factional politics, for example, plays out. We cannot ignore the Auditor General's reports on when they audit governance within the Eastern Cape. And we tend to not fare well when it comes to transparency, accountability, and responsible spending of money on developmental projects. Key to our challenges is a lack of oversight, wasteful expenditure, the inability to account for how monies are spent. And it's that funding that should actually go towards delivering this better life that people have been waiting for 25 years.
Is there enough of a conversation, though, with communities about holding their councillors to account timelessly so that people don't wait until it's closer to election to say, but the road you promised hasn't come through. The clinic doesn't operate in the number of hours that we need it to.
Those types of conversations would have occurred throughout the last 25 years. So there could be a sense from the community that, you know, these sentiments or these requests or needs are falling on deaf ears. And because we don't seem to make progress within the formal processes, we would much rather now operate outside the processes. For example, the community who didn't want to vote, the negotiation process, yes. That is a form of a community-seeking agency trying to say, listen, we are no longer just going to give you our vote, we want to see the goods delivered.
I want us to talk a bit more about this issue, but before we go there, I want to give our viewers a snippet of what some of the people we met on the streets in East London said they would like to see done differently going forward with the next administration.
Health, education, social services are more important, but really more focus around economic development. right, in terms of small enterprise development. I think those are our key focus areas because small businesses will be able to support us with the jobs that we require.
Jobs, more jobs, and
we'll talk about expectations and new entrants.
more improvement in our roads. You know, some of our roads are very bad, and we travel long distances, and we bug our vehicles, so it should be improvement there. But basically, things will come right.
We need to create job opportunities, and also we need to make sure that we support the businesses. And we need to make sure that there's dignity in the country, the leadership is strong and is supportive in all angles. And we need to make sure that our communities are also supported, especially the rural areas, make sure they are developed so that our country can move forward.
Well, what I would like to see is them start at the bottom, work with the people that really need help, and then get to, these type of suburbs. But it's the people at the bottom that have got nothing that need the help the most.
Well, Jolene, some of the people in our inserts were talking about the things they would like to see done. They want to see jobs for communities. They want to see improved services for the lower income groups, for the lower end of our communities. An issue that comes about is new players in the game. We now have ATM that's making inroads in the Eastern Cape. We have EFF that's growing. How do their manifestos or the issues they raise related to some of the issues that people want to see done differently going forward?
I think it's not just the new kids on the block, so to speak, their manifestos, but most political party manifestos actually spoke to those issues. For me, a key thing to watch in terms of what is going to happen in this province, which is particularly important for the African National Congress, of course, it is the heartland of the ANC. Most of its leaders were born and bred here, our great struggle and liberation heroes. So, we have to see to what extent voter turnout. We were talking about Mzimvubu, for example, and in 2004 you had a voter turnout of 81%. By 2014 it was only 67%. So voter turnout for me will be key to watch. And also to what extent the ATM will be able to indeed make inroads, considering, we had one by-election where we saw the ATM enter the political space. So we kind of need to see how that dynamic is going to play out, considering that the UDM, EFF and ATM, DA as well, are kind of fishing from the same pond at the moment.
When you're talking about that, there isn't much expectation for the ANC to lose majority in the province. But can we expect any surprises, Rufi?
I think yes, the ANC would most probably take the province. For me, I think the key surprise would be by how much.
That is an interesting view. We will see how much. It's a discussion that's been going on even nationally on how the majority party or the governing party would fare this time around compared to previous elections. That's something worth watching into going to tomorrow morning, or rather later into this day, as we're already on results day on Thursday. The first round of results has come through already from the Eastern Cape at Mzimvubu. We'll be looking right here at the Results Operations Centre in East London for more results as they come through during this evening and later into the day. But with that, we're wrapping up from the Eastern Cape. Let's go back to Pretoria.
All right, thank you very much. We're actually coming back to Joburg. Thanks very much to Asanda. They're coming to us from the Eastern Cape, where those first election results have come out. And you heard the question there is how much the ANC will win by, but they are saying that the ANC should take that province there. So, of course, Asanda will keep us updated as to the goings-on in the Eastern Cape throughout this morning with myself, Flo Ladwaba. Let's take a short break for now. More after the break.
The Drakensberg is the name given to the eastern portion of Great Escarpments, which encloses the central Southern Africa plateau. The name means Drakensberge in Afrikaans and is called Ukahlamba in isiZulu, which means barrier of spears. The Drakensberg escarpment stretches for over 1,000 kilometers from Eastern Cape, then forms the border between Lesotho and the Eastern Cape, and the border between Lesotho and Kwazulu-Natal. It then forms the border between KwaZulu-Natal and the Free State, and next as the border between KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga. It winds north through Mpumalanga, where it includes features such as Blade River Canyon, Three Rendezvous, and God's Window. The Drakensberg is the highest mountain range in the country, reaching 3,482 meters above sea level.
All right, welcome back and a very good morning to you. If you've just joined us, of course, we're continuing with that rolling coverage live 24/7 here on SABC of those elections. And of course, results have started to trickle in. We heard from the Eastern Cape where those first results came out there. And Asanda will be keeping us updated, our reporter there in the Eastern Cape. Shortly, we'll be crossing to the Rock in Pretoria. But for now, just a story we've been covering. Well, thousands of South Africans, including the president, braved the chilly winter morning to gather outside a polling station in Soweto, south of Johannesburg on Wednesday. President Cyril Ramaphosa promised to correct the mistakes of the past. He was speaking to the media after casting his ballot at Itekani primary in Shawela.
The normally quiet township of Chiawelo in Soweto, bustling with activity, throngs of people jostled to catch a glimpse of their son. Ramaphosa was born here in 1952. He returned home to make his cross, evoking memories of 1994.
This is a vote that reminds us of 1994, because in 1994, our people were just as excited as this, because they were heralding a new period, a new future for our country. And today, this is what I am also picking up. Our people are really excited about what lies tomorrow.
Confident of victory, the president said he was ready to hit the ground running.
People were all standing here. I'm going to climb their shoulders and stand on their shoulders so that I can see far ahead, so that I can do exactly what they would like us to do. This, for me, is fantastic, and thank you very much.
He wanted those who were protesting to voice their concerns through the ballot.
It is only when you vote that your voice can be heard. It is only when you vote that those issues that you are concerned about can actually be addressed.
The results will be officially announced on Saturday. It's been a grueling 3 months where politicians have been crisscrossing the country, stating their case to the electorate. It's now up to these people to decide who will be their next government for the next 5 years. Mzwandile Mbeje, SABC News, Soweto, Johannesburg.
Well, South Africa's former first citizens were among millions of people heading to the vote on Wednesday. Former President Jacob Zuma cast his vote in Nkandla on Wednesday. He was joined by 3 of his wives, including Makhumalo and Ntolwane Primary School. Zuma told the media he's confident the ANC will win, but he's also closely watching the results of opposition parties.
After campaigning for his party primarily in KwaZulu-Natal, the former president voted in his hometown, in Nkandla.
We are very happy. I'm also happy that there were no major incidences that were reported even during the campaigning. I think people are beginning to understand what democracy is all about.
The country's second democratic president was among the 1,000 registered voters at a station in Killarney, Johannesburg. After his recall, Thabo Mbeki steered clear of party activities and campaigning. He recently publicly endorsed the ANC's campaign. He offered some advice to the incoming president.
People are very concerned about poverty, are concerned about unemployment, are concerned about all of these problems, inequality, etc. And therefore, I think whichever party gets elected nationally or provincially, those parties have got a very heavy responsibility practically to live up to the expectations of the people with regard to those matters.
A stone's throw away, another former president, Kgalema Motlanthe, upbeat about the party's prospects.
We campaigned so that the ANC should get a clear majority in this province. So that wasn't part of the plan. If it eventually happens, we'll take it up from there. But for now, the ANC will win.
A former deputy president and now executive director of UN Women returned home to cast her ballot.
Well, I don't expect things to change overnight, but I hope there will be momentum towards change. We're dealing with a lot of service delivery protests. I think we really have to make sure that the next time we vote, everyone is coming to vote happily.
Former President F.W. de Klerk made his mark in the mother city. He appears to have high expectations of the man currently at the helm.
There is disappointment, but everything is not dark in South Africa. There's light at the end of the tunnel. If the ANC wins and President Ramaphosa keeps his promises, things will get better.
De Klerk predicted victory for the ANC nationally and a win for the DA in the Western Cape. Manqaba Mchunu, SABC News.
All right, we're going to return shortly to the Rock, where Arabile Gumede is standing by. And if you missed it, at 11:30 last night, the IEC Commissioner, Mosotho Miepe, highlighted that there had been some serious allegations of double voting. And he did talk about the number of checks and balances in place that the IEC has in order for that not to happen. So in case you did miss that briefing at 11:30, let me just take you through some of those points that he did speak about. He said there's a voter's roll which only allows single voting, valid ID must be produced, scanned ID before you vote. Of course, we all know about that, that little ink mark on the thumb, and the completion of a form which is a declaration. Party agents, observers monitoring, reporting processes in place, and capturing of results and keeping it on that system which can be recalled at any time. So just a reminder for you, if you perhaps missed what the IEC Commissioner had to say at 11:30 last night. For now, though, let's cross then live to the Rock. Arabile Gumede, good morning again.
Yeah, good morning, Florence. It has been, of course, an interesting one. And as you noted there, of course, the double dipping and double voting scenario and situation will be one that will be keenly watched as to exactly what the IEC does with regards to that. The systems in place that they say they have indeed to perhaps reconcile that matter and see exactly how things have fared. We'll, of course, wait for perhaps even a final update with regards to where things stand at present. Have they received all the boxes? Has closing of the all the voting stations happened successfully, and of course the delivery of all of those votes as well through to the Rock. Voting has continued until 9 o'clock, of course, and now we're firmly into that counting process as some of the results come through. Before we get into the analysis, however, let's just chat to the IEC. My colleague Simpiwe Ngongwana is standing by, of course, on the floor as we get some context as to how things are faring. Simpiwe.
Well, thank you, Arabile. Now, if there's one organization or institution that has been subjected to criticism and, and maybe praise over the past few months, is the Independent Electoral Commission. Now, we've seen earlier on when the day started that some of the voting stations could not open, and we're still yet to get maybe an explanation from the IEC as to what caused that. Now, I'm joined by the member of the National Commission of the IEC, Mr. Mosotho Miepe. Mr. Miepe, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. What's your overall impression of the entire voting process so far?
Let's say good morning, because we're into a new day. The voting process, in our view, started off got off to a good start, but we did have troubles in the day. Some stations not opening. We managed a majority of those, but we did have a few, a handful, that still remained unopened.
Those stations, why didn't they open?
Well, we live in a community where there are protests, there are natural disasters, there are, you deal with human beings. A combination of that put together is what we dealt with. In the end, we dealt with each one of those situations. We had to negotiate them. Generally, it went well. We have received, and we acknowledge that, we have received allegations, serious at that, which we take seriously, which allegations we addressed the media on, and we indicated that we will deal with each one of them.
Before we talk in depth about the allegations, I just need to find out from you as to those who failed to vote as a result of some of the voting stations failing to open. I mean, they've been robbed of their democratic and constitutional right. What kind of recourse do they have?
There are not people like that. We have remained open in those instances where persons could not come to the stations. But in the nature of these elections, persons who were unable to go to the stations could go to other stations. In instances where queues had formed, we did not close those stations by 9 o'clock. We remained open. There may even be stations, as I speak to you, that remain open to accommodate. We will not leave people that want to vote not to vote.
There's been allegations of, in some instances, of double voting, some people voting in more than one voting stations. How have you dealt with this? I mean, surely the IEC should have seen this coming, particularly with regards to the technology around this.
You possibly missed our update. We have been clear. We have said the systems we have developed in elections are very extensive. Until now, in our elections, these allegations have not arisen. We are not saying security measures cannot be breached. We are saying we are keenly interested in what, if any, of all of the measures that we have in place have been breached. We have a number of measures. And these measures, some of them work in combination, others work individually. The allegations we got are going to help us see which of the measures that we have in place have been breached and how they have been breached, and to what extent, if any, have this impacted on the elections. We've also committed that we will not be able to sweep this under the carpet. Our systems are transparent. You as the media know that. Every result that is beamed here, you can actually go pull the result system and see if indeed we captured that result right.
Mr. Moepa, in my understanding of the statement that you released, it was to the effect that there is absolutely nothing you can do with regards to double voting. For example, that machine that you use to scan the barcode to verify registration of the voters, surely that could have been used to perhaps spot if there's been discrepancies or irregularities.
But you're mistaken. That machine does not get you to vote. You vote on a ballot. That's the point we're making. We want people to understand that that machine simply says, yes, you're a registered voter. On the segment of the voter's roll, you are on sequence number 792. So that the person working on the voter's roll doesn't have to go through page 1, page 2, page 3. They go straight to 792. It does not, in any event, say that you voted. But it is an important check for us because it gives us your footprints. It does say to us, you've been at that station. What is going to tell us at the station is the sworn statement that you filled in to get the ballot. That's what's going to get, and we'll deal with that matter. That's why we're going to look at that. The point we are making is the following. We are not saying that you could not breach 1 or 2 or 3 measures, or all of them. We say we have never been to that point, and we want to see in this election how we got to that, if we got to it. And we will be clear. We will say to South Africa, this is where we are. And we are saying, even if we wanted to hide, we couldn't. And that's what we like with our processes. We will come back to you as the media and this nation and say, this has gone wrong, or nothing has gone wrong, and here's the evidence. We accept that this indelible ink, for example, as a measure on its own, it's a chemical. And any chemical has a contra chemical that can deal with it. If indeed that has happened, we will be the first to tell you. We will be the first to say, yes, indeed, there have been a number of people, our manufacturers, confirm that, and this is what they have used to get past it. We will not hide anything. So I want to assure South Africa, I want to assure you that we are basically saying there is nothing that's going to be a sacred cow. If it's our processes, if it's our systems, even if it's us, our own staff, we will say so. We have absolutely nothing to hide.
Okay, briefly, let's talk about the computation of the votes. After the entire counting process, how do the votes make it onto the leaderboard?
A very good question. Every one of the results that you see on the board is what I call a clean result. It's gone through a number of checks and balances, which we spoke about earlier, to say, for example, the result that got onto the board first. There were 24 voters in that voting station, and only those people in that voting station voted. So they couldn't, they voted once and 24 of them came. There was no person that came from outside who said, I'm coming to apply here. So we know it's clean. It has been received. It has been checked by party agents and election observers. It was received and signed for by all of those people. It was taken to a capturing site, captured, audited by independent auditors, gone through our internal checks, and once it passes all of those, it lands on the board without human intervention. If a result cannot go through that process, it will remain in the system. It will tell you and I at the same time that we have received this, we are unable to audit it or to match the audited result to the captured, and then it'll get stuck there. We'll be able to explain to you why it cannot get onto the board.
Mr. Moepe, I'm going to let you go. It's going to be a very long night, or rather a long morning for you. Thank you so much for chatting to us. That was a member of the National Commission of the Independent Electoral Commission, Mr. Mosotho Moepe, just giving us a brief overview of how the election process went by. And just a quick reminder, behind me are some of the election agents. I've been hearing some applause. They're busy looking at the leaderboard here. And just a quick update, the Democratic Alliance is leading in the Western Cape and as well as Gauteng. And the ANC is leading in pretty much all the other provinces, but I don't want to get to the details of that. We'll be chatting to some of the party leaders a little later on in the show. But for now, Arabi, let's back to you.
Yeah, Simpiwa, well, as you make note there of just the leaderboard in itself, we do, of course, continue to have it here ourselves as well, and we'll begin to unpack that in just a moment or two with my guests. It is, of course, topsy-turvy as those votes come in. It is still very, very early stages. We are just going to analyze and just share exactly what is happening thus far and what permutations it perhaps sets as we have the early run-in for these political parties. Does it perhaps give in a sufficient insight as to what exactly will happen as we move forward from here on in? Moving, of course, to Saturday. But for now, let me just introduce our guests as well. We have Mary Harris then from Markana, who does join us now as we unpack some of the results that have come out thus far and analyze the situation across the country. Of course, Rinesh Doraj as well, political analyst, joining us as well in the studio here at the Results Operations Center. We'll continue to unpack things as well for quite some time. Folks, thank you so much for the time and for joining us. It is an early morning, but in days like these, it's okay. It's quite all right, right?
Fine.
Right, exactly. We'll be okay with it. Mary, let's get into exactly how things have turned out thus far. Yes, voting has closed. We've now had the situation with regards to voting stations, some having a whole lot of issues, some opening late and the likes. But Overall, what would you give the voting process before we get to the results?
I think the voting process actually went extremely well. If you think about all the difficulty in getting everything all over the country, and sometimes at the top of mountains, I heard about one voting station that was on the other side of a lake, and the only way that I see people could get there was either by boat or by walking around the lake. Yeah. It was in the northern part of Natal. In the Soutpansberg, I know that old people were transported from the village to the voting station at the top of the mountain by a helicopter because they can no longer climb that mountain. So really, I think the IEC went to a lot of trouble to get this sorted out. There are issues. I think there's always issues. But the big issue that we have to think about is this material enough to change the results of the election? And I somehow don't think so, because we have seen reports throughout the day of places that ran out of voting papers, they resupplied. We have seen places like Vuvani, where the voting station closed because of the protest. They captured one of the leaders of the protest, and then the voting station opened again. It had to reclose later in the day, but a lot of people got the chance to bring out their votes. So I think there were issues, but not...
Out of 10?
Out of 10, probably like an 8. Let's say.
There we go, because earlier on I actually spoke to Simon Mabola, and he shared the same sentiments and also gave it an 8. Ranesh, do you concur?
Possibly yes, because well, I'm registered in KZN, so I just had a national ballot here in Gauteng. I voted at the Capital Primary School. Unfortunately for us, the line was very long because we got there on 11. We only finished voting at around 10 to 1, but we didn't mind it because it's 25 years of democracy. It's our right. It's our, we celebrating our democratic right of actually casting that ballot. So everybody in that line didn't look upset. They didn't look annoyed or angry in whatever way. There were some youngsters in front of us, and we were taking selfies with these youngsters, and I was just chatting to them. So everybody was in a very jovial, happy mood. In terms of the rating, I'll probably 7 to 8, because it's every 5 years it happens. The next elections that we are possibly going to vote in is the local elections, and that's 2 years from now. That's in 2021. So it's a lovely experience here.
One of the issues that have certainly come up, and we'll touch on the more critical issues with regards to protests and the like, is just the technology that we use around the voting process itself. Still very manual. Should we be finding a way to get technology involved in this, or are we just a society that's still too scared to get involved with that?
There are technologies to do this, but they use it in Namibia, for instance, where they vote electronically. But they have a voting population of about 1 million. So
compared to 35 million in South Africa and 27.6 which is registered.
Who are registered. So, it's a much bigger operation. So one has to look at those things. And on the other hand, what I would like the IEC to sort out are these issues of the zip-zap machines and the marking of the fingers and the possibility that some people might have voted twice. I buy the argument that if you voted at another station as well as your own, they can cut you out because you had to fill in a form, and if they get duplications of a ID number, obviously they can cut you out, and that won't be too comfortable. I think it's something like 10 years imprisonment or it's a long time.
It's a very long time. It is.
To think, okay, let's budge the system and vote twice, and then you might go to prison for 10 years. I don't think it's worth it.
Look, it's maybe 10 years, but it's criminal record forever,
It's a criminal record forever. And, if the people who did that, I don't think they thought it through. That was a daft thing to do. And but now, obviously, we're sitting with all of that now and say, how many were there? Did it influence the results, whatever? So I do think the IEC needs to look at other forms of voting to make it more secure.
Ranesh, are you worried at all about the double voting that has been noted as well in some areas?
I think these kind of problems were expected to crop up. It's the first time I heard about the double voting issue, the issue about the ink as well. We saw the UDM leader Bantu Holomisa actually tweeting a video, very worrisome video, but then we had the IEC staging a media briefing earlier on just to clarify what that video was really about. Then I'm also part of the EFF's WhatsApp group, the communications WhatsApp group, and I saw another very worrying video there where another person said they voted twice, and the person had a video. They very graphically showed how that ink was removed from the person's left thumb, and yeah, it was very concerning. But I think the IEC has come a very, very long way. If you think from how the IEC started, from the it was formally created in 1996. It went through several processes. The voters' roll was created for the 99 elections, 98, 99. We kind of see the technology that the IEC has employed for these elections, and they've been communicating absolutely well. So I think this is just a bump on the road. It's not a major one, it's just a very small one, but I think communication is absolutely vital.
The other thing that I think needs to be sorted out is the voters' roll itself, because there are still some people on the voters' roll without formal addresses. And there was a court order that the IEC needed to sort that out. Obviously they got some extension for that, but they have to give attention to that before the next local government election.
All right, let's get into some of these results that have sort of trickled in. 574 voting districts have been completed with regards to counting there. That's 2.5% then, right? And if you take a look at the board just behind us, of course, valid votes cast there are about 131,591. So yes, it is very, very early stages. But what can you draw from the sentiment? I mean, the ANC sitting with support of 51.28. I'm going to draw straws and hold you to account on this one. Do you think that's where the ANC stays? Does it get worse? Does it get better?
It gets a lot better, because if I look at this map in front of us, the eastern part of the Eastern Cape hasn't come in yet. There's very few spots here where it has come in. In KwaZulu-Natal, there's very, very few spots where anything has come in. The Free State looks very empty to me. Limpopo looks extremely empty. There are 3 spots in Limpopo that are in, and most of the colours are in the Western Cape and the Northern Cape, and a lot of these areas are in parts of the country that is very thinly populated, to be honest with you. So it's all the small voting districts that are coming in now. There's very little, none of the cities are in yet, none of the very high population concentrations like in the north of Natal is in. So no, this is not how it stays, and it is really too little to say anything. We can talk about what's the pattern now, but it will not stay like this.
I mean, places, particularly in the Northern Cape, I mean, those you can just tell that it's very, very quickly going to... Exactly, so that's going to be completed very soon in itself. That's probably going to be the first province to even be complete, right?
Not necessarily. You must also remember that the distances in the Northern Cape are really very, very far. And we can see, you know, this part, sort of the south of the Orange River, there's not really many results in from there yet. So, you know, the areas closer to Uppington and closer to Kimberley are in.
And I think very importantly, Arabella, you've got to remember that these elections are very different to past elections. This is the first time in 25 years since 1994 that we've got 48 parties on the national ballot. Now, to reconcile those 48 parties, to count all of that is going to take, you know, the turnover time actually in the ballot box, the voting booth was increased because of that. And then, you know, the ballots in the actual boxes, the national and provincial ballot boxes, you know, the turnaround time was slowed down somewhat. So I think, you know, to reconcile all of those things. And remember, for the past few elections, I think the last, the final results actually came in on Saturday morning, around 7 or 8 o'clock. in 2014, around 2 o'clock, around this time, we only had 10% of the result. At 4 o'clock, it was just 20%. 5 o'clock, 50%. By 10:30 tomorrow night, hopefully we'll see around 90, 93%. But I think this is just very, very early days.
Yeah,
don't read too much into those results just yet.
Yeah. Okay, but if we are to take some sort of context from this, the likes of the EFF now sitting at 6%, how far into the double-digit space do you think they get into, Mary? I mean, they certainly want to reach into that and of course, even become the main opposition party at some stage. Do you think that they're challenging sufficiently?
Not this election. I think they will get into the double digits, say 11 or 12%, but they will not challenge the official opposition, the DA, for that position yet. So if we have
who's the EFF then getting votes from, if I can call it that? So where are they actually gathering ground? Is it from other parties or is it actually from those top two?
I don't.
It's actually from the ANC and most of the townships in Gauteng.
Yeah.
Because if you think of the Gauteng, how it is structured, they've got 10 major townships here. And in past elections, from 2011, the local government elections, 2014, 2016, the ANC suffered, obviously because of turnout as well. Their people did not go out to vote really, so the DA benefited. But also part of that vote, whatever votes the ANC lost, actually migrated towards the EFF.
And we also must remember, I mean, there's a little purple dot in Gauteng. There's none of the big Gauteng results in yet. And all
even
three...
in Limpopo, not too many, right?
Yeah. All three, the biggest parties, get their largest support out of Gauteng.
Yes.
So when those results come in, I think that will change the balance and we will see what will happen. And the EFF is a very, very interesting party. I think if more younger people were registered, they would have benefited far more because students, young working people are a lot of the EFF supporters fall into those categories. But obviously that is the population or the age group where there was the lowest registration.
Ranesh, earlier on, I managed to take a look at some of the social media stats that we had, and the CSIR was here with us as well, and we were able to, see a few buzzwords as well and the like. And with regards to mentions, it turned out that the leader of the EFF, Julius Malema, had more mentions than President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, we're not saying that Twitter is the be-all and end-all, of course, right, of the entire voting process, but it does give you some semblance of what those who are tech-savvy, for example, are saying. And for them to lead a little bit more with the EFF, that does tell you that that is their base.
Yeah, I actually saw that. I think it was a Google trend kind of thing over Twitter. But we also got to remember that EFF supporters are normally very tech savvy. If you look at the support base of the EFF as a party, it has more supporters on Twitter than actually the ANC and the DA, who started much, much earlier than the EFF. Because the EFF was formed in July 2013. They contested the first election in 2014. Then you have a very charismatic leader in Julius Malema. And also, just to go back to what Marie was saying earlier on, you look at the voters' roll. In 2011, only 25.39% of young people between 18 and 29 were actually registered. It kind of stayed stagnant in 2014, 25.02. But in this election, it actually declined from 25.39 in 2011 to 21.42%. And who are the main supporters of the EFF? Presumably, we commentators expect the 18 to 29 group. But people also discount the fact that part of the middle class actually fall between 30 to 39 and within that age demographic. So lots of analysts I've been seeing on TV, hearing on the radio, they discount that key demographic, because I've spoken to a number of people and they even ask me, where do you get your stats from? Why are you excluding us from the 18 to 29 group? Fine, you've got your supporters. The EFF can turn out those people at those rallies, but those people are not registered. So the EFF going forward, they need to focus on getting the people with their IDs to the IEC municipal office whenever there are registration drives at universities. You know, they're winning all the SRC elections recently. Just get their people registered so they can be eligible to vote for them.
But it does bode well for them for the future then, doesn't it? I mean, if they're pandering to the right base, if you can call it that, taking the youth and saying to them, indeed, get involved in this. As you said, the youth elections in varsities are being taken up by the EFF as well. They're really strong in that regard. It does mean that for the future, they certainly look a whole lot stronger.
It's a party on the up, in the growth phase. But I think there are two other things that we need to think about. The one is that young people not voting is not a South African phenomenon. It happens all over the world. Young people are losing a lot of trust in politicians, political parties. They also are more critical of politicians and political parties. They say these people do not listen to them. They don't even, you know, give them anything. They don't govern in their interest, and so on and so forth. That happens all over the world. That's the one part of it. And the other part of it is this issue of non-registration. And the EFF has another interesting feature, and their support is a lot more male than female. If you analyze the profile of EFF supporters, I know they took a lot of trouble to have females on their list, on their parliamentary list, but they also need to build on their female membership and their female voters, which they are not getting half of them at the moment.
And if they can get that right, you certainly never know exactly what the situation might be, as we say, for the economic freedom fighters. Certainly a party that has continued to be on the up and works very hard as well, though. It is 2 a.m. in the morning, of course, as we continue to just check in on those votes. As things proceed right now, we will continue to update you on exactly what is happening across the country in various regions with regards to those votes as they begin to trickle in. But as usual, my colleague Simphiwe Ngongwana is, of course, on the floor here at the Results Operations Center in Pretoria, and we will get a word from him now as well, just with regards to what the situation is down there, perhaps speaking to a few political parties as well. Simphiwe, I'll cross over to you now, and we'll chat to you in just a bit.
Well, Arabile, all these parties that are here, it's safe to say that they have one clear goal. Well, amongst others, the one clear goal is to unseat President Cyril Ramaphosa and put the African National Congress out of power. And one such party is the Alliance for Transformation for All, ATA. It is actually the brainchild of the taxi industry in South Africa. I'm going to chat briefly to the presidential spokesperson, Mr. Sabelo Tumezweni. Mr. Tumezweni, very good evening to you. Oh, should I say a very good morning to you and welcome.
Morning, and welcome to.
I'm looking at the leaderboard right now, and the ATA has scored 242 votes nationally. What is your impression of such a score?
Yes, it's still early hours, and if you look closely at the leaderboard, you would see that these results are mainly from the Western Cape, and if in a closer scrutiny would reveal that they are from the most affluent areas where we will ordinarily not have a base as a taxi industry. So we're still waiting from your votes from your townships and the rural areas where we will show the best that we can offer.
Okay, we've been seeing you campaigning in the past few months. We've been seeing you presenting your manifesto and party policy positions to your supporters and the masses. How can you ensure that you don't turn your back on South Africans after this vote? Because that's what most politicians do. After voting, they come back after 5 years.
Look, we have introduced a new approach to a new and a fresh approach to South African politics. We have introduced a sector approach. We're not only a party of the taxi industry. We have students, your tertiary education students amongst our midst, and they are in our candidate lists. We have your traditional leaders. We have your hawkers associations. We have your small business associations, etc., etc. So those will be the guardians now of our values and principles as espoused in our manifesto.
Okay. trailing with about 242 votes as at now, because so far the valid votes that have been cast are 146,975. I know it's still early stages, but just how confident are you that things will turn around for the better for ATA?
Yes, as I have already said, we are at about 0.1%. So far, and these results, as I said, if you have a close look at them, they are mostly from the affluent areas. We have canvassed very well in your townships, in your rural areas, and we are very confident. Come the early hours of the morning tomorrow, we will be counted amongst the top in the leaderboard.
And yeah, come tomorrow morning, we'll definitely be in touch with you again and see whether that has come into fruition. But Mr. Dumezweni, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, that was the presidential spokesperson of one of the new parties, the Alliance for Transformation for All, which is a brainchild for the taxi industry. I'm going to move a little bit to the next table, which is the Democratic Alliance, and I'm going to chat to the former chief whip of the DA in the Gauteng legislature, and is now a representative of the party here at the IEC, Mr. Mike Moriarty. A very good morning to you, Mr. Moriarty. Welcome.
Good morning, Sipiwe. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too. Now, just looking at the leaderboard, the Democratic Alliance is leading in the Western Cape and as well as Gauteng. What is your impression of such a development?
Well, it's nice to see a picture like this, but it's too soon to actually make the calls. I think that one has to see about 1 million votes getting counted. At the moment, they're sitting in about 150,000. So it's a long way to go. So I wouldn't make too much of these projections. It's interesting, but it's not indicative at this stage.
So how has voting been? I mean, looking at the fact that the DA has been embroiled in so many scandals, particularly in the Gauteng province, do you think that so many DA supporters and members turned a blind eye to these scandals?
You're going to have to be more explicit. I don't know what scandals you're talking about. The fact is that the DA has been at the forefront of fighting corruption, and I think we're going to get support on that ground. I think we also have found a lot of people liked our message of a job in every home. They like a party that is strong enough to look for an honest, professional police service, to secure our borders and to fight corruption and to ensure better service delivery. And that's our track record, and we're proud of that, and we think it's reflective in what we're going to get in terms of the support in the final analysis.
From the results that have been given, I see that the DA has scored 25,906 votes in the Western Cape, and in Gauteng, the DA has scored, let me see, 3,010 votes. That's far ahead of the African National Congress, and nationally, it is trailing at let's see, 56,560. Just how confident are you that the DA will maintain this lead?
I'm confident of two things. Firstly, that we will grow from our current support nationally, and also that we will ensure that the ANC is kept below 50% in Gauteng and in the Northern Cape. And I suppose I can be confident of a third thing, and that we'll retain the Western Cape.
Mr. Mike Moriarty, I'm going to let you go while you monitor the scores. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Mr. Mike Moriarty. He's the Democratic Alliance representative here at the IEC, the Results Operations Center in Pretoria. And one of the new players in the game is the Good Party. It is actually an offshoot of the Democratic Alliance. And I'm going to chat to Ntabiseng Lipoko. She is the national chairperson of the Good Party. Very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning to you too, Simpiwe. Thank you.
I know you've been fervently staring at the leaderboard, and I'm not sure, I couldn't quite get your facial expression while you were reading that scoreboard. So what's your impression of the latest?
Well, I must say that we're very excited to see that as you're looking at the national scoreboard, we are sitting at number 6 so far. And that is quite promising. That shows that the South Africans, they went out there and they are actually partnering with us in getting on a project to fix SA.
I must say that you're doing quite well. I mean, as a new party, which is hardly a year being formed, do you think that the kind of support that you've been receiving so far has anything to do with the de Lille factor, the fact that people are sympathetic to Ms. Patricia de Lille, or is it simply that people bought into your policy and your manifesto?
Okay, I wouldn't say that it's a sympathy. Basically, I wouldn't know because I haven't had people expressing themselves. But what I know is that in terms of the leader that we have, she's very good when it comes to politics. She's an old politician, even though the party is new, and also based on her way of doing things in terms of being highly competent as a leader, and her service delivery has been phenomenal. So I think that people, they aspire after what Patricia de Lille can do for the country.
When you talk of people, do you also mean the DA members as well? Some of the DA members who defected from the DA and joined Good.
Well, I must say that we're very excited to have our members back and the members of the DA. So it's a very exciting time for us in a way to see that what the polls are saying at the moment. Yeah.
Are you confident that you'll be maintaining this lead?
We are very hopeful. What I can say is that we are actually very grateful for what we're seeing currently, and that the people, they actually showing a little bit of confidence and maybe more later. So at the moment, we don't know what the outcome will be. So whichever seats we're going to get nationally or provincially, we will be happy with the outcome.
I saw Good Party engaged and embarked on a very vigorous campaign process. Are you going to maintain the kind of momentum moving forward, even after the elections? Because we've seen some of the political parties, most if not all these parties, have turned their backs on the people after the elections.
Well, we are actually, let me speak on behalf of the team, the Good team. Basically, our leader had an eye and an understanding the kind of leadership she wants to have. She went and chose people that are experienced and are highly competitive, with lots of energy and with an intent to make a difference in this country. So we understand that this is a long-term project, basically. We have the next 5 years to go out there and work with the people in South Africa and actually go out and listen to them in terms of what they really want. We're here to serve them. We basically are servants, and we want to be held accountable as our name is Good. Yeah.
All right, I'll be saying thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. I'm going to let you go for now. Well, that is the national chairperson of the Good Party, which, safe to say, an offshoot of the Democratic Alliance, Ms. Ntabiseng Lipoko. As I mentioned, she is the national chairperson. And the Good Party has scored 1,687, 1,687. That's after 173,611 votes have been counted nationally. All right, as I've mentioned, well, a very interesting comment that former President Jacob Zuma mentioned is that, he called out against the media for not having asked these parties what they will be doing for South Africans. Well, we've been seeing various manifestos and party policy positions from these parties, but one question that all these parties failed to answer is that how do they make sure that most of these South Africans, the voting of voting age, do not just become voting fodder, but become equal stakeholders in the country's economy and the country's nation building. We are still yet to see whether that will play out as after the elections moving forward. But Arabile, it's now back to you.
Yes, and Pio, of course, highlighting some key scenarios then, key situations out, of course, with that voting panel. I just thought I'd touch on exactly how things are faring right now when it comes to that voting board. You did make mention of that, of course. Yes, this is specifically just in the Northern Cape, but we'll unpack exactly how things are faring nationally as well. And this is really just a scenario and what it looks like really when it comes to the National Assembly currently. This is with 3.5% of those votes being completed, of course, which means that only 818 of the 22,925 voting districts have thus far been voted, completed rather, when it comes to that counting process. 49.33% right now for the ANC. A key statistic for me and a key worry for me would be the voter turnout. Of course, we had around 73.48% or so for the 2014 general election there. If I just go to that, you will begin to actually see that. If I can get it going at some point, you'll see 73.48% when it comes to the voter turnout in that year. And we're hoping to get that figure going up a little bit more then when it comes to the 2019 election, but currently sitting at 61.52. Doing the maths with regards to this one is that if we have 27.6 million people registered to vote and only 73.48 in accordance with the last election, national and general election, do actually vote in South Africa, that means we'll have 20.4 million South Africans actually casting their vote. South Africa would have asked, of course, to want a whole lot more of you voting, certainly, and indeed making your marks and really saying to South Africa, this is the situation. Another key issue, of course, is the spoiled votes. At present, out of the 173,611 votes, 2,319 of those, or rather an added 2,319 have been spoiled, unfortunately, giving us the scenario we have at present. Of course, as I've mentioned, I'm joined in studio by my two guests, Mary Harris from Markana and Ranesh Dauraj, who's a political analyst, then joining us in our studio here at the Results Operations Center. Folks, it is... I worry just about that voter turnout. You know, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, and it's perhaps some of the youth as well saying that they don't want to get a whole lot more involved into the political spectrum because they don't believe that politicians are listening. But how do we fix that? How do we get them back into this sphere of government, which is very, very critical and very important? It determines their future.
You need to build trust, because currently people are not trusting politicians and they're not trusting political parties. So that is the big thing that's wrong. If you can build trust, people will probably turn out more to vote.
Yeah.
And I think the way to build that trust is by political parties starting to deliver on their promises and stop telling one thing in April and a totally different one in June after the elections.
Yeah. Does the offspringing of different parties, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but the petering off of parties from other parties and splintering off, does that make the situation better or worse? I know we're in a democracy, but does that actually help the scenario with regards to voting and voter turnout, Ranesh?
I don't necessarily think it helps the situation, but I don't think we need to discount the smaller parties because remember, every vote in every election counts. Because when the IEC eventually does the vote calculation, the seat calculation, all of the votes are included in that formula that the IEC uses and seats are allocated. I'll give you a very nice example. In the 2014 election, the quota for a National Assembly seat was close to 46,000, and eventually I think it was 13. It was eventually 12 parties 13 parties rather that got seats, but there were two other parties, two smaller parties benefited from that formula, how that formula was calculated. Those two parties were the APC and the PAC, and they got around, I think the APC had around 37 or the PAC had around 30,000. So they had below that threshold of 45,000. So those votes for the smaller parties, it may seem as if it's wasted, but really it's not wasted. And another very good example about smaller parties being effective in Parliament is this brilliant example I saw on Twitter. One of the journalists actually commented about the ACDP. The ACDP in the last 5 years, in its term in Parliament, actually proposed a private member's bill that gave fathers paternity leave. So fathers now can enjoy paternity leave like mums, when they have babies. So smaller parties, they do have a voice.
Yeah, they certainly do. Ranesh, we will continue our conversation, of course. We want to head back to Johannesburg, or Auckland Park in particular, of course, as we continue to unpack the conversation. Back to my colleague then, Florence Letwaba.
All right, thank you very much then, Arabile. I'm also sitting here with the scoreboard, but as we've been saying, it's really too early to call it at the moment, with only 3.57% of those voting districts completed. But nonetheless, ANC sitting at 49.33% of those votes, DA 32.58% of those votes, and the EFF sitting at 5.66% of those votes. That's probably going to change quite drastically as we go on in the morning. Right, so after the break, we're going to be checking with our provinces, our different reporters, Tumela Machoko in Mpumalanga and Palesa Mwete in the Free State. We'll catch up with them and find out what's happening there and what the scoreboard is looking like in those different provinces. Do stay with SABC.
I'm Nana, and I want to tell you a bit about Economics Unbound. It is a live studio current affairs program that brings an understanding of the economy, how it operates, and how it is managed. The show seeks to include ordinary South Africans in purposeful and well-informed discussions about the economy.
The whole corruption and having to pay people to get businesses, it's like killing our businesses.
While providing them with enough information to make better economic and financial decisions.
And we need to start thinking of new ways of creating new structures that are relevant at the time.
Through this program, audiences can look forward to 30 minutes of deep and tough questioning on the issues of the week.
Why do you think that our economy lends itself to such collusive behavior and such concentration of monopolies in key sectors?
This is the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial.
When news happens around the world, we will bring it to you. We will keep you informed. Each day, every day, our news team digs deeper, getting all the facts to provide comprehensive reports to what's important to you. We cover all corners of the globe. SABC News, independent and impartial.
25 years ago, it was a vote for hope, for a new nation. It was about rejoining the global family. This time, it's about bread and butter issues, about corruption, jobs, societal ills, and social cohesion. Then and now, always there, when South Africa decides.
In a UN report, scientists say climate change is getting worse.
1/3 of our food sources for the population come out of the ocean.
We spoke to people who have been directly affected.
We have lost a lot of cattle. Gemsbok-vlakte, Tosca gebied and Jakkalskop. Everywhere you will see there's animals dying.
I've lost 2 of my cattle this January.
Africa's demand for clean drinking water is rising.
Drinking water is a top priority.
The next day when the water comes back, it's dirty.
We have implemented a level 5 water restriction, effective immediately.
Environmentalists seek solutions to preserve the planet.
This is a Cape Kirpa, which is also one of the endemic species that is only found within the Western Cape, so it occurs nowhere else in the world except in our water systems.
All right, welcome back. Coming to you live from Studio 11 here in Auckland Park, SABC in Johannesburg, as we bring you that rolling coverage on South Africa's 2019 elections. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm going to take you through the national votes here, the National Assembly. The ANC sitting at 48.78% of those votes, the DA at 33.03%, and the EFF at 5.57% of those votes. And we're looking at what? 3.97% of those voting districts completed thus far. So that's just an update. But as we say, too early to call. Got a long way to go at this point. And like I said just before that break, that we'll be crossing over to some of our reporters in the different provinces. And we're going to start with the Free State then, where Palesa joins us from the Results Operations Center in Bloemfontein. Palesa, good morning to you. Let me just take a quick look where we're standing there in the Free State at the moment. The ANC sitting at 59.14%, the DA 19.09%, and the EFF at 9.37%. Interesting results there so far coming out of the Free State. What do you have for us there at the IEC Centre? Palesa, good morning to you.
Good morning. We are here at the Results Operations Center in Bloemfontein now. The various political parties are gathered here, obviously, to be able to get the results as they come in, literally live. Counting is going on at the voting stations. So, you know, once the results are captured, they come through to this center. And, you know, we've just spoken to some of the political parties to hear how they feel generally. You know, they feel that the processes have gone on smoothly. But, you know, just to talk a little bit about how voting has progressed. We know that here in the Free State, there were about 1.4 million registered voters. We'll talk about the turnout with the IEC representative who will be joining us very shortly. But also just to make you aware, currently we've got results from only 14 voting stations, and the total figure of voting stations is just over 1,500. So that just goes to tell you that really what we are talking about right now is very, very early stages. And like you've just said, the ANC is leading, followed by the DA, then the EFF, and then in fourth place is the Freedom Front Plus. But right now we're going to talk to Mathabo Rasenge, who is the representative of the INC here in the Free State. Mathabo, thank you very much for talking to us. I'm sure you're quite tired. It's been quite a long day.
I'm exhausted, Balisa, but thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the voter turnout. Where are we standing at the moment? Obviously, like I said, it's still early. You know, stats are still coming in, but where are we standing?
We are at about 680,000 voters out of the 1.4 million that have registered.
So we're actually standing at less than 50%?
It's less than 50%, yes.
And do you think that number is going to go up? What's your impression?
It is going to go up because we have not included the special votes casted yesterday, and we are still not done with our statistics. As soon as we have it, I'm hoping we will get to above 50%.
And then the voting stations, did everything go smoothly? What were the issues that came up?
Well, the issues were about the weather. We had some stations that were flooded, we had some tents that fell, but we managed to remedy the situation. And again, we have about 14 stations that have captured the results so far, so we still have quite a lot to capture the results.
When do you think most results would be in?
Well, they will start from this. They started from around 11 o'clock, so from until tomorrow, 12 o'clock, will probably be halfway, if not done.
Thank you very much, Mathabo. Now, also joining us right now is Jan van Niekerk from the Freedom Front Plus.
Morning, Felicia.
Your party is currently in fourth position, basically. Were you anticipating this? How do you feel about how the processes were?
Yeah. No, thank you very much. The Freedom Front Plus sees the process as quite fair now, but we had a lot of logistical problems in the Free State. I think the rain also didn't help much to that. But a part of those problems that we had in the province were ballot boxes that weren't delivered on time and voting stations that only opened after 10 o'clock. It could have been due to the weather, but I think it's also just administrative problems that we may have seen. We are not surprised in what's happening in the Free State. We really worked hard and we're looking up to God to help us. And I'm sure we're going to do good at the end of the day.
Thank you very much, Mr. van Niekerk. And now, Kididi Metsi from the African Content Movement. Your party is relatively young. You only launched in December. What's your impression of how the processes went?
No, we are very happy. We have the process, we have the results thus far.
All right, apologies. I think we're having some problems with the connection there to the Free State. I see that Balasa was trying to communicate and have a conversation with some of the party representatives. We'll cross back to her at some point during this morning. But just a reminder of where the Free State is standing then at the moment in terms of the results that have trickled in. And at this point, it's 5.36% of the voting districts completed. So still, as we say, a long way to go. But the ANC at this point is sitting at 59.75 of those votes, the DA at 18.18%, and the EFF at 11.17%. But also important to talk about the Free State. They seem to have some support there in the Free State, of course. So the FF Plus sitting at 6.77% of the votes. And then you might find this quite interesting. Coming up in 5th place is ATM. With 0.56% of those votes. So that's what's happening there at the moment. But we'll be keeping up to date and talking to Palesa throughout the morning. We do apologize for that disturbance in our feed. Moving on then, vote counting has entered its 5th hour, and the IEC says that most voting stations officially closed their doors by 9 p.m. But several voting stations allowed voters to cast their votes after the closing time in Ermelo, Mpumalanga. For more on that now, let's cross live to the Results Operations Center in Mpumalanga, where our reporter Dumelo Mashoko is standing by. A very good morning to you, Dumelo. Tell us what's happening there in Mpumalanga. I know that we'd had some issues. They ran out of ballot papers, and yesterday there were some issues with IEC officials. Take us through what's going on at the moment there at the IEC Center where you're at in Mpumalanga.
Well, good morning, Flo. Everyone here is trying to barely keep awake because everyone has been awake since the early hours of morning on Wednesday. So everyone here is trying really they're barely awake here this morning, trying to just count the votes. The votes have started coming in from all the 1,772 voting districts. So far, all of those districts have not finished all of the districts in around the province, but so far we know that about 5,833 votes have now been counted provincially in terms of provincially. And you'd remember that 1.9 million voters registered to vote in the province, in Mpumalanga province just alone. So far the votes that have been counted, it's only about 5,833. The ANC is leading there with about 68.03%. So far they have about 3,963 votes, being followed there by the EFF, which they have now about 670 votes, and the DA is just right behind the EFF with about 583 votes. The FFF Plus is also making inroads here in the province. They have about 372. So far they didn't have a member in the legislature, so it seems like if this is anything to go by, they will have a member in the legislature, in the Mpumalanga legislature, because of what they have so far. There are about 28 parties that have registered to vote, that have registered in the province so far, so those parties are showing results. But so far, other parties like the new parties like the ATM, they are right behind with about 10 votes that have been counted so far. But you remember that only 5,000 votes have been, about 5,800 votes has already been counted for. You remember this province has had like many issues, especially with voting. With voting in the morning, in yesterday morning, there were many protests in Akonhoek and also in Showela village in just outside Hazyview, where residents there were actually preventing people to go and vote, threatening community members not to go to vote because they're saying that they don't have water, they don't have electricity, and also they don't have roads in their community. So they were threatening people not to go to vote. So those have been disruptions that we have seen in the province, and also the fact that some of the polling stations had to stop for about an hour because they didn't have enough ballot papers in the regions, because in Matafeni, just outside Mbombela, they didn't have enough ballot papers, so people had to vote. I had to wait for about an hour to wait for ballot papers to be fetched from another voting stations so that they can be given to them. But so far, everyone here is trying to make sure that they stay awake tonight because the voting are coming in. Let me just give you, Lungile will just give you a pen into what we can see on the screen there. I know it's not going to be very, very clear, but the votes are coming in, and they are coming in very slowly here in Mpumalanga. In Mpumalanga, you'd remember only about 1.9 million, just over 1.9 million voters have registered to vote in the province, and so far only about 5,833 votes have already been counted. They're counting very slowly because you remember Mpumalanga is quite a rural province, so some of these votes have to be transported to the big cities so that they can start being counted because of these because of the ruralness of the provinces. So they have to transport some of the vote and the votes and also the ballot boxes to the areas where they need to be started to be counted. Only those votes have now been counted. It's going to be a long night for political parties. We've seen some of them already left, so we've seen some of them sleeping because at this point they're just trying to make sure that they stay awake to the early hours of the morning. But so far only about 5,833 votes have been counted, and they're still coming in, and they're still coming in, and they're hoping that by early in the morning more votes would have been counted in the province, and they will give us like a good number of how many votes have been counted so far. But you remember, let's just give you a background again of how many votes have so far been counted. 5,833, and the ANC is leading there with 3,963, and the EFF is just right behind them, and also the FF Plus, which is like making a big inroads in this province, which is like the new block on the new kid on the block. You remember that parties such as the BRA, the Better Residents Association have done very well in this province, but so far we have not seen them in the top lead. They're just right there with the other parties that are still under about 10 votes at this stage. But we've seen, but it's still early to actually say which party will do the best here. But so far we've seen that the ANC is leading, but we don't know in which region because now the votes are only coming in, but also the votes will continue being counted as the day progresses, and also we will also be watching out on how the province did nationally, and will also report on those issues, and also report on issues that have happened in terms of ballot papers not being delivered to the people, if people manage to vote in all those regions where the ballot papers could not reach the people right on time. Flo?
Right, Dumelo, thank you very much. Coming to us from Mpumalanga there, and as he said, the ANC in the lead, EFF up next, closely followed. I wouldn't say close, but yeah, they're there. And the DA and FF Plus also coming up in that top four. But at this point, only 54 voting districts have been completed. That's 3.05% of those votes counted in Mpumalanga. Dumelo keeping an eye on that. I can see our cameraman in Mpumalanga doing some serious work there, trying to keep focus on that scoreboard. But we'll keep in touch with Dumelo and, of course, Paleza, who's in the Free State throughout the morning. Do stay with us. Let's take a short break.
Political parties have delivered their manifestos, and now it's time for you to make sense of it all. From campaigning to declarations.
Let's speak to the people on the ground.
We are sick of crime.
Interesting comments coming from the ground there.
SABC News delivers unrivaled, unrestrained coverage, giving you the platform to express your views.
I want more job opportunities.
SABC News will be live from all corners of the country. You will get expert analysis in all languages, party reactions, and the true story behind the numbers.
It's all about the numbers.
Across 4 TV stations, 19 radio stations, and online platforms. SA Decides 2019. SABC News. Independent, impartial.
Zolani Mkiva, says that they believe that the king should be released and that they are not being opportunistic.
The last 4 years, we have been engaging with government. It cannot be a post-colonial government that begins to jail a king in a context of what actually happened.
Bobby Solomons, he's the spokesperson of the Alex Shutdown Committee, the multi-billion rand Alexander Renewal Project. Nothing came of that.
Community wants to know what really happened to the money.
The creative director of the label, Mansu, that of course means black is beautiful in Sesotho. What has been your experience in that regard, given, you know, some of the more established labels that you have managed to work with?
It is hard. 15 years is a long time. There's a lot of sacrifice for your family to make for you.
This is the thing.
Without the brief.
This is it this morning.
All right, it is 38 minutes past 2 a.m. here on SABC News. And of course, we're continuing with that rolling coverage of the elections. That's what's on everyone's lips. Elections 2019. Right, we'll be crossing shortly to the Rock. But first to Kwazulu-Natal, where about 100 voting stations suffered delays, mainly due to service delivery protests. 6 people were arrested after roads were blocked on Wednesday. Angry protesters prevented electoral officers and voters from accessing voting stations.
KZN was identified as one of the election hotspots, with more than 5 million registered voters and 4,800 voting stations. The IEC and police had their work cut out for them. Early morning protests threatened voting in various areas. Protesters blockaded the N2 near Umgababa, south of Durban. Similar protests erupted in Nwamakhuta and Mandawe in southern KwaZulu-Natal, and as Mhlabuyalingana in the northern parts of the province. Some voters found voting stations locked. Police say they managed to bring the protests under control.
Well, this is my 10th station since this morning. Everything wherever I've gone, fine, long queues, police enough, with the exception that here in KZN there were 2 incidents. One of those incidents is Ward 109, where people thought that the station has been burnt. Actually, it's the councillor's office that has been burnt. The station is there, the police are there, people are voting. The second one was the closing down of N2 by the people of Kwamakhuta. That has been opened. There is a smooth running of the transport. But generally, in the province, the going is well.
In Durban, there were delays at 80 voting stations. Some had to wait for ballot papers, others ran out of ballot papers, or stations couldn't open because of protest actions. By late afternoon, problems were resolved. The IEC said voting progressed smoothly in most parts of the province.
I'm expecting that the party that is going to win is going to make a difference, because I'm trusting South Africa that they're going to make a right choice for us, for the South Africans.
My dream for South Africa is a South Africa that is united, South Africa that is not racist, and yeah.
After the results, I hope we have a good possibility that all of our South Africans will all get fair jobs.
ANC KZN Chair Sihle Zikalala voted as Ndwedwe, northwest of the city. The DA Premier candidate Zwakelo Mngcangu cast his ballots in Nongoma, while the EFF Provincial Chair Vusi Khoza voted in central Durban. Bongani Kema, SABC News, Durban.
All right, so let me just give you an update then on what's happening then in KwaZulu-Natal in terms of the election results. At this point, only 1.06% of the voting districts completed. That's 52 of them. Let me just give you, you can check on your screen right now there. The ANC sitting at 59.5% of those votes, the DA at 19.6%, IFP, well, of course, it was a IFP stronghold there in KwaZulu-Natal, 9.1% of the votes there, and EFF coming in at 6.5%. So that's what the top 4 is looking like at the moment there. That's, as I said, 1% of the voting districts counted at a 64.6% turnout and 1.7% spoiled ballots there. All right, so that's an update then on KwaZulu-Natal. I will, of course, keep you updated, and we will, as the team, keep you updated from province to province as well. well as the national results as to what's happening there. We now return to the results Operation Center in Pretoria, where of course my colleagues Arabile Gumede and Simpiwe Ngongwana are pulling an all-nighter with me this morning. Then let's cross through to Arabile. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Florence. Well, it certainly is an interesting night to, of course, be pulling that all-nighter. Certainly no complaints on our side, I can assure you of that much. If we take a quick look at that board as well with regards to the results and things that are happening, you mentioned Kwazulu-Natal, of course, and if you take a look at just the main board with the national results themselves, about 136,394 when it comes to the African National Congress and its current standing, 87,848 there for the DN. This is just with a total account there of 274,700. So, of course, things are beginning to perhaps trickle in. We're getting some sentiment around where things currently stand. The party in third at present is the Economic Freedom Fighters, the EFF. They're sitting at 16,739. And the Freedom Front Plus there, look at that, 12,866. Of course, a lot of that would be based on just the areas in which voting has currently been completed and where exactly. If we just take a look again then at the situations in and around South Africa, this is of course Limpopo, and yes, fine, it is only 0.5% at present with regards to how much those votes have been counted. The National Assembly itself sits at around 4.8%, but let's go back to Limpopo and just see what the situation is like. Only 0.79% there of votes being counted. The ANC currently sitting with nearly half of the support thus far. So that situation is clearly one that is telling a deeper story. Just headed off to the Northern Cape. Of course, this will be one of the provinces where you get a whole lot more done, perhaps a little sooner. They have a total number of voting districts of 707. 150 of those have been counted, so 21.2% completed in that regard. The ANC sitting up with nearly 49% of the support on that front. The DA sitting at 33.18%. Still continuing, of course, with just how things are faring as well. In KwaZulu-Natal, as Florence mentioned as well, 60% there for the African National Congress with 1.17%. Very early days, of course. So, of course, we cannot necessarily call too much on this, but it is just interesting to note that the regions that have currently voted, that have cast their vote thus far, and this is where we currently sit. The EFF sitting in third place in the Eastern Cape, just over 6% of the support there. Any surprises here for you, Ranesh, Mary Harris? Nothing?
Not at all. Like you rightly said, very, very early days. Yeah. Like the figures we mentioned earlier on, I think people are tired. The vote counters from the IEC are extremely exhausted. It's been a very, very long day. I think the main results, thicker results, will start flowing in from 5 o'clock later this morning. Yeah.
I know we've mentioned the voter turnout, and I think for me it continues to be one that bothers me quite a bit, because it's the only way we get to actually send out that clear message, right? It's the only way we get to actually say to the government, no, I don't agree with what you've done. I would like somebody else to do it better. Is the message heard when you don't vote?
We looked at some figures earlier where you and I, we looked at the figures of how many people registered. Perhaps you can find that one again.
Yeah, I think let's try to get to that actually.
Everybody in South Africa,
no worries,
that are eligible to vote, everybody that's eligible to vote, only 3/4 are registered to vote. Yeah. There, that's the figure. In other words, only 3 out of every 4 South Africans who are eligible to vote in this country is registered. The other quarter disenfranchise themselves by not going to register.
Yeah. Their message isn't heard, right? They currently sit with a situation where government can't actually tell them, this is what we'll do for you, or what exactly it is your mandate is for us. They're going to sit with an unheard voice.
Yeah, I do think that we as citizens of a country have a responsibility to vote. And it is a responsibility of the government to take our vote seriously. Yeah. So if you disenfranchise yourself I don't know. It is just very alien to me to do something like that.
Yeah, my analyst that I had a little bit earlier on in the day during the polls, when the polls were open, was actually saying that not voting could be considered a criminal offence because it should be that kind of serious situation, don't you think, Ranesh?
You know, in Australia, you're supposed to vote. It is a criminal offence if you don't vote. But I don't want to live in a nanny state like that, where they say, this is what you do in the morning and this is what you do in the afternoon, and then you need to go and vote as well. I would rather see it as my privilege and my responsibility to go and vote and do it.
Yeah. Ranesh?
And I think, Arabile, what's very worrying is that if you look at those stats again, between 1994 and the last election in 2014, the difference between the registered population and the voting age population, those over 18 and above, hovered around between 4 and 7 million. The 2019 general elections, that figure between 4 and 7 million has suddenly climbed up to 9 million. And I think that's very, very concerning. Yes, the IEC also has a responsibility. Civic education is needed. But I think political parties need to be more active. They need to go out to communities. Maybe the electoral system needs to change, to ensure that accountability is factored into the equation. Maybe we need a police state like Australia, where it's a criminal offense not to vote and partake in your country's democracy.
Mary Harris just stood up there and went on a little bit surprised at that one. Not what you want necessarily, but of course we're trying to encourage people to make their decisions.
But you are not encouraging people by forcing them.
Agreed.
You are encouraging people by building their confidence. So I think the forcing part is the wrong way to go.
So perhaps it's the parties are doing it wrong by not fulfilling their mandate and doing the right things.
And South Africans are not like that. If you say to us, go in that direction, we might think of 3 or 4 other directions that look a lot better to go into. So rather leave us that little bit of freedom that we can decide whether we want to vote or not, but at least also teach us at school about our responsibilities and not only about our rights.
That's where the 19% eligible voters aged between 18 and 19 are registered. That education from a young age is perhaps not coming through as to the rights of South Africans, the right to vote and the need for it for the country.
And the responsibility. It's not only a right, it's a responsibility as well.
Well, folks, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it this morning. I know it has been a harrowing session, but one of keen interest, of course, and we'll continue to watch out for how things fare, of course. As we've continuously noted, I am joined by my colleague, Simpiwe Ngongwana, who is on the floor here at the Results Operations Center in Pretoria. I'll cross over to him now. Simpiwe, we'll be back with you, of course, at the top of the hour from my side here in the studio. Simpiwe, over to you.
Well, Arabile, thank you so much indeed. I'm coming from the floor of the ROC, the Results Operations Center of the Independent Electoral Commission right here in Pretoria. And Arabile, your guest there spoke of voter apathy, and I suppose it's one issue that has been a thorn in the neck of so many of these parties to a point where some of these parties even made last-ditch efforts to beg voters to go to the polls. I also received a message from one of the parties that I'm not going to mention to plead, like literally blaming me to, rather begging me to go vote. And I'm going to speak to some of these parties right here as to how voter apathy has affected them. I'm going to start with the Congress of the People, COPE. And very good morning to you, Mr. Bloom. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Spiwe, and good morning to the listeners as well, the viewers as well. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. Just how badly has voter apathy affected the party?
You know, people, when we were doing door-to-door, they were very disillusioned. People have asked, why must we go and vote? And for 25 years, we are voting, and it seems that things are getting worse in the country. So we are saying that it's a very serious problem in the country, that people are promising, parties are promising people things, but they are not delivering. That is the problem, why people were feeling so disillusioned.
Are you also not of the school of thought that maybe in some instances voter apathy is a party specific? People do not want to vote for a specific party because it's not delivering or it hasn't delivered in the past. How has COPE fared in that regard?
No, the problem is the ruling party have not delivered. Opposition parties are not in power. Opposition parties are contributing and listening and fighting for their constituency. But now, when the ruling party is not delivering, people don't see that. People are saying that the ruling party, it's no use in voting. I mean, people have said to us, we are voting for 25 years now, but we are still staying. For instance, Kliptown, we were there last week, and people were asking us, the ruling party have promised us, why must we go and vote? I can tell you that the voter turnout will be very low this year. I can say it without any doubt.
Okay. Now, I see COPE has scored about 1,230 votes. That is after 316,214 votes have been counted. What's your impression of the score?
You know, 2014, it was very bad. Now it is not even 500,000 votes that is already that is counted, and we are standing at 1,200. We see light in the tunnel, because I am saying 2014 by this time it was not even 500,000. But now we are standing at 1,200. So it's positive. And as I'm saying, that it's not even 500,000 votes that is being counted nationally. So we are very hopeful that things will come out. That figure will come up. And we hope that our votes must be doubled like the 2014 votes.
Mr. Bloom, I'm very curious to know how, I mean, you speak of doubling of votes. I'm very curious to know how COPE will be able to achieve that. I mean, the hot topic in South Africa now is the land issue. We know that the EFF has made quite some headway insofar as gaining support, popular support from most South Africans. And COPE, on the other hand, has been swimming against the tide. What makes you so confident that these figures will double?
There's many people who believe in what we have said, that we respect the constitution of this country, and we still believe in that up until now. We are saying that the leaders who have drafted our constitution have not made a mistake. We are not going after popularity. We are going on facts, and we are standing by what we have said, and we will be proven right.
Isn't that politically damaging, though? Because most of black South Africans, all they talk about is land, and you advocate for something total opposite.
But are we saying that Nelson Mandela and the people who have drafted that constitution was wrong? If we are saying that we are against black people, I am asking, are we saying that the people who have drafted, Nelson Mandela have signed that constitution, are we saying that he was wrong in signing that constitution? This constitution was drafted by the people of South Africa.
Mr. Bloom, I'm going to let you go while you still monitor the scoreboard. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That was Congress of the People National Spokesperson Dennis Bloom speaking to us about how the DA has fared. I mean, he also talked about Nelson Mandela, and it's very difficult to say at this point whether the goal or the dream of 1994 has indeed materialized, given, I mean, on the economic periphery, given the sluggish growth of the South African economy, and as well as the alarming levels of unemployment and poverty. Let me now speak to one of the oldest parties in South Africa, the Pan-Africanist Congress. I'll be speaking to the Secretary General, Mr. Apathy. Very good morning to you, Mr. Apathy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, and good morning to the viewers.
Perhaps one of the biggest issues affecting most of these parties here is voter apathy, people refraining from vote, some of them destroying vote as a result of some protest action. How has PAC fared in that regard? How has it affected the party?
We believe that the PAC will still do well in these elections, particularly in provinces such as Eastern Cape. We are also seeing us doing well in the Western Cape, KZN. We are hoping to do well, Gauteng and in Limpopo. But it is true that there's a voter apathy. Voters are disillusioned out there. They believe that all political parties are the same. They don't see the difference among us as political parties. So it's up to us as an organizations to go and teach voters about our differences and what the PAC stands for.
I mean, you talk of voters being disillusioned. Don't you think, or rather, I should put it more clearly, do you think that PAC is still relevant with most South Africans?
All the parties that you see here today speak the PAC language, and since from our inception, we've been speaking the same language. If there's any party that has been consistent, it's PAC. So our message remains relevant as ever. Otherwise, we wouldn't have all these parties talking of land, which has been the PAC position. Others of talking free education, that has been the PAC position. The only thing that we need to do is to convince them to come back home.
I quite agree with you there when you say that most of these parties speak the same language. I mean, the issue of black consciousness is increasingly on the rise. But then, unfortunately, the factional battles between the APC, between the PAC and ZAPO are actually costing the party some votes.
Definitely. We are working on some of those issues, and we are hoping that the public out there will begin to see a united PAC first and foremost. And secondly, we'll also be talking to these other parties which are thinking alike, like I'm saying, to come back home to the PAC.
Don't you blame yourselves? Don't you have yourselves to blame then for some of the disgruntled members of the party, some of the voters who turned your back on the PAC as a result of the factional battles within the party?
Partly we can blame ourselves, but there are many other issues that can contribute towards the organization winning the elections. There is an issue of resources, there's an issue of visibility, the media-wise. We have been shunned by many media houses as an organization. Despite the fact that our campaign has been very vibrant, we have not been able to see us in the media and all of those. So all those factors come together and contribute to us not doing well. But of course, partly there's also a blame that we are taking as an organization. Hence, I'm saying we are also working on some of the shortcomings that we have as an organization.
Do you think you will be maintaining this kind of score moving forward?
Yes, and we are very optimistic, even now, that we'll still do well in these elections, comparatively speaking to the previous elections.
All right, Mr. Poe, thank you so much for joining us. That was the Secretary General of the Pan-Africanist Congress, Mr. Apa Poe. Now, let's chat to the Freedom Front Plus, and I'll be speaking to Mr. Philip van Staden. He is the chairperson of the Gauteng province. Mr. van Staden, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning.
I see that the Freedom Plus has already scored, let me see, according to the updated scores, last updated at exactly 3 minutes before 3 a.m. Let's see how the party is faring. 16,965. When I was going through your website, the first line was about 25 years under the ANC government and the country is still in a terrible state of repair. The party is not very clear on what it can do to South Africans. All it does is to lay the blame on the ANC. Fair enough, you did at some point talk about a free market economy. So what is it that the Freedom Plus will do for South Africans?
Well, I think first of all, if you have read our manifesto, we will see what our plan is for when we came into power, into government. First of all, the very first thing that we will do, we'll cut the cabinet ministers from 35 to 16. And we will give our attention very much to education, infrastructure in South Africa, the economy, and so on and so on. So yeah, you must go and read our manifesto, and you will see what exactly our plan for South Africa's future is, and what we are planning to do to solve the problems in the country. And at the moment, we have the problems we have in South Africa. We need to build the country together, and we must stop living in the past and look ahead for the future.
So what is it that you promised the 16,000 voters who had voted so far? What attracted them to you?
Well, I think it's a fact that some of the other parties couldn't come to terms with their promises. They kept the voters for the past 25 years. The voters came over to us in this instance. And I think also that the voters wanted the Freedom Front parties in coalition governments on national and provincial levels to give effect to our manifesto, what we have in this past election.
Don't you think that by diverting attention from your mandate and from your manifesto and focusing on other parties, for instance, the battle between BLF, it affected your party in a way?
Well, you must understand that the BLF's constitution is against the country's constitution. You can't have a party registered which is only for a certain group of individuals in this country. That's against the law. That's why we took the matter up to court. And the court said at the end of the day, but the Freedom Front Plus was actually correct. The correct procedures wasn't followed by the IEC to register the BLF as political party. And they didn't publish it in the government gazette. So in that instance, we make a point of view to say that the IEC was wrong in this matter. The court gave us the order to say that the IEC was wrong in this instant, and the Freedom Front Plus was correct. But South Africa is a South Africa for everyone and not for only certain racial groups.
So just how confident are you that you'll be maintaining the score, or you'll do much better moving forward?
Oh, well, you must understand, as we've picked up, we have already won VDs in the Northern Cape, Northwest, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, Gauteng and Free State. And we are very confident that this will go on for the rest of the tallies as it's coming out. And we're very confident to go back with a bigger team to the National Assembly in Parliament, and to be getting more seats in Gauteng, the Free State, Northwest, and seats as well in Limpopo and Mpumalanga at the end of the day.
Okay, so there's also the issue of voter apathy, some of the voters who did not vote as a result of disgruntlement of some sort. Did you get the sense that perhaps some of your voters abstained from voting as a result of one issue or the other?
No, I don't think some of our voters abstained from this election. We have this problem since 1994. There's a certain group of voters in this country who have never registered and have never taken part in the democratic elections in this country. But it's actually a big problem because they throw their future away. You must vote in elections into this country to have a future in South Africa. The stay away is not from our votes. I think it's more from other parties who wasn't in line anymore with their policies, but definitely not our voters. We had a very hard campaign, and we see to it yesterday. But all our voters went out to go and vote in the election of yesterday.
Mr. Van Staden, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. That was Philip Van Staden. He's the chairperson of the Freedom Front Plus in Gauteng. And perhaps the big issue, as I've mentioned earlier on, is the issue of voters abstaining or voter apathy. You know, some of the economic or rather political pundits that I've been chatting to are also of the view that, you know, there's no national vision, hence voter apathy. Back in 1994, under the leadership of Nelson Mandela, you know, the vision was national reconciliation, it was a freedom. But now, 25 years later, what is the national vision that all South Africans can subscribe to, that can unite and bind all South Africans? And I quite agree with Mr. Van Staden. It is very, very important that every South African needs to exercise their democratic and constitutional vote and determine their own destiny and not let another person do that. Arabi, let's back to you.
Yeah, Simpire, you raised quite a significantly great point there when it comes to just what is it that actually is binding people, particularly to their political parties. Of course, as time goes by, this is what a democracy does, right? It does sort of allow you to spread the message somewhat, spread the sentiment, and of course, thoughts differ then on what it is that South Africa needs in order to move forward as a country, and each political party itself will perhaps offer differing versions of that as well, and what it is that certainly sets out the path. South Africa, you've now made your decision vision, and it is now time for us to reveal and constantly try to update exactly what the scenario is when it comes to the situation there. Just with regards to how things are faring thus far, this is very quickly in the Eastern Cape, where we have 9.5% of votes having been counted on that front. The ANC sitting at 70, just around 71% with regards to support on that front. The DA still the opposition for now anyway with regards to those votes. 455 voting stations out of the 4,791 have indeed been counting. Look at that, a voter turnout of 59.12%. Not the kind of numbers we certainly want to see when it comes to that picture. On the national front, 63% with regards to the voter turnout there. Again, the sentiment that we're not trying to push out, of course, across the country. Headed off to Limpopo as well, then the ANC has still maintained some sort of stranglehold with regards to Limpopo, but the likes of the EFF, of course, do come into the fore here, and it is a stronghold for some parties as well. So the EFF will perhaps filter through here in some way, with 1.5% of the votes then having been counted. 56.2% of the support belongs to the ANC when it comes to Limpopo province. We'll continue to update you, of course, across the morning as well as we continue to get the results coming in. But for now, I'm joined by two guests as well in our studio here at The Rock. Dr. Pravesh Deba from the CSIR as we unpack a whole lot more of that data, and Michael O'Donovan, political analyst as well, joining us as we get into the next session as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the time this morning. It's a good morning to indeed be able to at least have something interesting to talk about, and this is certainly an interesting one thus far. I'll get your thoughts as well, Mr. Donovan, O'Donovan, just with regards to how things have fared, how you've seen things with regards to the picture just around the country. And even though we've had a few issues here and there, would you say that we've had a free and fair election and things have gone on without a hitch?
Well, not exactly without a hitch, but it's gone off as well as anybody could expect. There will inevitably be some hiccups here and there, and nothing seemed to be really substantial. So I trust that the IEC will be able to sort out the complaints that have been lodged, and I don't think any of the complaints indicate any material impact on the election. And Mr. Deba, do you think then we've, looking at the data you've come up with and seen and things as they've progressed, it kind of does tell a holistic picture? It's not anything too major that we perhaps have seen come through when it comes to perhaps interferences, voting stations perhaps in some areas not necessarily opening. It doesn't change too much when it comes to the data points.
From what we can see thus far, it doesn't. It's very difficult to say from the data side, but I wouldn't say come to a conclusion that there has been any issues.
With regards to some of those results, yes, we're getting a few coming through with regards to that. Any more sort of updates that you're seeing from the CSIR side with regards to, whether it be regions, whether it be voting districts as well? What is it that you're getting?
As you know, the CSR is doing the predictions, so we are predicting what the final outcome would be, and we are continuously updating these predictions. Now, thus far, we have round about just over 5% of the voting districts that have been declared. Usually we are more confident when we get to somewhere between 5 to 10% of the voting districts being declared. But I think even at this stage, with 5% of the voting districts being declared, we can in fact say what the final outcome would be with a certain margin of error. So if we look at what it is currently standing at, at a national level with the ANC, we are looking at the ANC ending up around about 55%, plus minus 2 or 3%. With the DA, we are currently looking at the DA ending up with a predicted amount of 22%, and the EFF around about 10%. Now we have to be very careful, because the one thing here is that the percentage for Gauteng is extremely low.
Yeah.
That also would have an impact on the results as well. When it comes to the the predicted turnout, we are looking at about 61% at this moment. That is what we are estimating. But again, we have to be careful. It's still very early stages, and we will give more updates at a later stage.
How much does that hurt, Michael O'Donovan, with regards to just having a voter turnout, if it is anywhere between 60% and 70%, which is of course still lower than the 74% we saw in the 2014 general election? That's bound to send a message to some of the political parties.
Well, people have been talking about voter apathy, and I think that unfortunately places the focus in the wrong place. The focus should actually be on the political parties. Voters feel a massive sense of alienation. They have a lack of enthusiasm about the choices before them. And if these projections are correct, there is 14%, up to 40% people decide, I'm not going to vote this time, compared to the last national election. There's a massive decline in voter participation, and it's indictment on the choices that we've been presented with. People have simply lost that conviction.
Do you think the political parties, though, will hear and heed the call in this context then? Do you think that this would send out that clear message, and that they would actually begin to say, actually, yes, we do need to change the way we're doing things?
Well, at one level, the CSR projections, particularly for the ANC, is simply indicating that they've continued with the downward trend that they've been experiencing for the past 20 years. And if it continues once more, they will no longer have that majority. And if they don't get a message now that they need to be accountable to the electorate rather than to the internal dynamics, then I'm afraid that they're in for a very hard time.
One would have thought that they would have gotten the message in 2016 already. I mean, they lost 3 major metros. Things began, to seem very, very difficult for them, and yet here we are.
And yet nothing really changed until perhaps Cyril Ramaphosa became president. He promptly promised a new dawn, and we are still waiting for that light on the horizon.
Do you think the ANC is in what I'm going to deem very loosely as the last chance saloon?
Absolutely. They've got a massive internal problem, which they don't seem to be able to solve. And that can only be to the detriment of that party. I'm not sure that the DA and the EFF are actually doing any better, mind you. But each of these parties have their own. They've all been inordinately inward-looking. They've been looking at the internal dynamics, their own issues, and really treated the electorate as somebody that would simply do their duty and vote for them. And so to a certain extent, if the voter turnout is as low as it seems, there can be no clearer message there can be no clearer wake-up call.
We really hope they actually see it then. Dr. Debo, earlier on I had, a look just with regards to social media, things where people were saying, things people were, able to update with regards to how it's faring for them. And one of the hashtags there was, after I vote, I would like, or things they would like to see happening after. Are you still getting the sentiment that people are still trying to perhaps offer their demands, shall we call it that, from government through Twitter? And yes, we continuously say that it's not the be-all and end-all. Twitter doesn't necessarily represent the entire country, but of those that are on it, these are their thoughts.
Well, when you're looking at Twitter, obviously there's a lot of people that is making certain comments and things like that. So, yeah, I would say to a certain degree it does reflect their thoughts.
And I suppose the difficulty then becomes with regards to these voting stations and just where the numbers then are coming from. People look to how you've treated them over the last 5 years. And this is clearly evidence of how they've been treated, right?
I would not be able to comment on that.
Okay, Michael, then, if you were to take on what the mantle is right now, for example, if the DA was to look at itself right now and see where they stand, even at present, do you think they should be happy thus far? And I'll go back to these numbers here and the board exactly and just go to a national level here and just say they're sitting currently at 30.68. Of course, we'll always say very, very early, but 6.63% of votes done, 30.68. That's a really good number for them.
That's a really good number, but if you look at the map, it becomes quite evident that the vast majority of the stations that have reported are rural.
Yeah.
There are precious few stations from the metropolitan areas. And if the DA has any support base, it's really going to be the metropolitan areas. And following on 2016, they should have been able to draw upon their status in running Johannesburg, Tshwane, Cape Town, and for a small limited period Nelson Mandela. And that should stand them in good stead, unless they did not live up to their expectations.
Yeah.
And we're going to find out quite soon when the metropolitan areas come in.
Were they given a fair chance, though? And what I mean by that is that you had, for example, the African National Congress ruling sort of the other areas, the other metropolitan areas, for a much longer time. We've given the DA, for example, since 2016 till now, it was August 2016 if I'm not mistaken, so we've barely given them 3 years in total to show what it is that they're capable of doing.
It's a very short period. But related to the alienation that many voters or potential voters feel is the need for haste, the need for differences to be seen. So the continuity in the metropolitan areas between the DA administration and the previous ANC administration is the defining feature. Things have stayed the same rather than changed.
Yeah.
And I think that is going to be to the DA's detriment in the metropolitan areas.
Sure. So you see that number weakening or strengthening, perhaps?
The 30%.
Yeah.
Certainly, I certainly see it weakening pretty much in line with Pravesh's forecast.
Yeah, so right through to around 22% or so, if not perhaps even, give or take 1 or 2% right there, Dr. Deba. As the CSIR, perhaps any other sentiments and views that you guys have noticed perhaps then from the results?
We also do the provincial results as well.
Yeah.
And with the amount of data that has come in, it is very difficult to actually come to much conclusions or to decide on or to give actual values. But I think if we look at the Northern Cape, we can say that the ANC will have majority power in the Northern Cape, but it would be reduced compared to the previous national elections.
Yeah, I'm interested as well in Limpopo, if perhaps you have any sort of forecasts or thoughts with regards to how things may fare on that front. Of course, the EFF wants to try and pull as much as possible from that as well. They'll probably try to do the same in the Northwest and the likes as well. But the maintenance of the ANC in that area is perhaps going to still be there. Is it going to be as high perhaps as the past? Does that drop?
For Limpopo, unfortunately, the amount of data that we currently have is not sufficient for us to
give a clear indication as to.
But I'm pretty certain that at a little later stage this morning we'll be able to make some comments on Limpopo and the other provinces as well.
Of course, we do continue to give you note that it is very early stages. 6.63% of votes having been completed in terms of counting as well there. 1,520 voting districts completed there of the 22,900
525. Voter turnout there at 63.06%. Spoiled votes sitting at 5,758. We're hoping that that number doesn't climb too much with regards to that. We are beginning to see some color come out of the map over there, but the heavy municipalities, the regions that have all the massive numbers, of course, those haven't necessarily come through. And that might be a clear indication as to where things stand. But for now, as you can see there, the ANC sitting with a total support of 50.79%, 30.68% for the Democratic Alliance, the EFF sitting at 6.52% with regards to that number. Michael O'Donovan, 4.44% for the VF Plus. For now, yes, we've maintained and we've said it before. For now, that number is still good for them.
The number is very good. Oh, well, that number is okay for them, given that most of the reporting districts are rural.
Yeah.
But that said, in numerous by-elections running up to this, the Freedom Front did inordinately well. For example, in places where they contested against a DA share of votes dropped, while the Freedom Front Plus, in some instances, got more than 20% of the votes cast. Now, by-elections are a very poor indication of national trends, but the Freedom Front Plus was able to get more people to vote for them in the by-elections than voted for them in the municipal elections. So they seem to have far greater traction. They're still a minnow in this regard.
Yeah, of course.
But you can't write them off.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it. And then we can talk very quickly as well about the good party there. Of course, if we talk about the rest of the parties there, we'll start off with the good party there. It seems Patricia de Lille is just completely gaining traction. And yes, fine, in the early stages, this is what it looks like. But at 1.1%, that's very good for a party that's just come out less than 8 months ago.
Absolutely, and she's at, as far as I can tell, she's at a very low media profile.
Yeah.
So she's doing inordinately well. Got to bear in mind that the results that we've been seeing have been skewed towards rural areas, plus to that southwest corner of the country, where Patricia de Lille's part would have got more votes. So I'm not sure that that percentage is going to hold. But I think what we need to look for is, can they get to that 45,000 vote or so votes?
Yeah, where
they need to get that seat in the National Assembly.
Yeah, that'll be quite interesting. Of course, my question becomes actually, so before Patricia de Lille even joined the DA, of course she had the ID, right, the Independent Democrats. And would you say that perhaps it's those voters from back then that perhaps are making the switch then to the good party under the similar and same leadership, I suppose?
Well, they've got a lot of patience. I mean, then they'll be sticking from the ID to the DA, back to good. And look, I would assume so, but I have no evidence that is the case.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that at the same time kind of portrays a good party as a colored party.
Yeah.
Which, to a large extent, those stereotypes of the vote as a racial census has changed. And there's no future, I think, in any racially defined political party.
Yeah, it does become difficult to move forward as a party if you do align yourself particularly with just one race. Let's continue to check in on some of the political parties in the lower parts of the list at present, having had 6.63% of the votes counted. COPE there for me, very interesting, still getting 1,815. Yes, as you noted, 45,000 is perhaps how much you need to just start getting a seat there. As well, then, as you can clearly tell. I'll just go to the more page on this right over here, and as I said, COPE, as we said over there, at 0.41%. They're still getting the numbers, and this is despite what some may term as perhaps a collapse in the recent, big parties that have sort of split. You had Agang come to the fore, and that sort of fell by the wayside, and we'll try and find a number of, how much they're getting right now. The likes of COPE, as we mentioned there, 0.41%. But there they are, still sitting up there in some respect.
And they're one of the few parties, I think, that may have reversed that trajectory towards obscurity. South African politics is full of examples of parties that got up to 6% and then disappeared. Agang, Independent Democrats, and so on.
Yeah.
And COPE will probably be the first, maybe the first party to almost disappear and then kind of hold on a little bit longer.
The question is, hold on for how long? How long? Right? And hold on to what level? Because, holding on at these levels doesn't necessarily give them a seat, and they begin to just contest. And this is where the question then comes with regards to whether having as many political parties necessarily gives, especially on the general and the national election vote, actually gives the right sentiment for people on the ground to say we are actually going to be heard if your vote doesn't necessarily go to National Assembly.
For the voter, there's actually there was a three-way contest yesterday.
Yeah.
They could vote for their preferred party, they could defect to somebody else, or they could abstain. And the early indications are that people with abstain. They stay away and not vote, rather than defect to another party.
Sure.
So the disillusionment with the three main parties could very well have translated into support for these 45 other parties on the national list and 75 odd parties on the provincial list. And we might still see a resurgence in some support for smaller parties. And that's where the question then comes, if these small parties don't get a seat, did you waste your vote?
Yeah. Sure. Well, there we go. There is Agang, of course, as we are trying to find that for you, of course, then. Agang sitting on 0.09% currently at 400 votes, with around 6.63% of the votes having been counted thus far. We will continue to, of course, give you a whole lot of sentiment around what is happening with regards to the voting scenario in the country there. ANC currently still sitting at 50.79% when it comes to the voting scenario and that situation. Do continue to stay with us here, of course, here on SABC News. You can even interact with us, of course, SABC News online, and join the conversation. Hashtag SA Decides 2019 as well then. Remember that I am joined by my guest, Dr. Pravesh Deba from the CSIR, and Michael O'Donovan, political analyst. Then, as we continue to get into how things are faring, we'll continue to have rolling coverage for you here. Some of the issues that have come out as well, Michael O'Donovan, has been the likes of double voting and double dipping as well. Then, would you be worried about such? Would you think that the IEC is able to actually take that?
I would not worry about that at all. There have obviously been several failures on the IEC's part.
Yeah.
But for somebody to vote more than once, there has to be a failure on 3 or 4 different systems simultaneously. So the fact that you can rub your ink mark off doesn't negate what's already been stamped in your ID document.
Yes.
Doesn't negate the fact that it's already been marked off on the computer. So in order to be able to vote more than once, you have to have multiple systems failing simultaneously. Obviously, it is worrying if that the IEC might be slipping up with something as simple as making the ink permanent.
Yeah.
And hopefully they can rectify that quite quickly. But as I say, they've got multiple systems.
And none of them should be failing there. Okay, well, appreciate that. For now, we will cross over to my colleague, Simphiwe Ngongwana, who's, of course, on the floor here at the Results Operations Center in Pretoria. Simphiwe, what do you have for us?
Well, Arabile, I've got so much to tell you at this hour. You know, in 1994, the only top three parties were the ANC, the IFP, and the National Party. And in subsequent years later, there was a massive fragmentation of the opposition movement. And now we only have the ANC, the EFF, and as well as the Democratic Alliance. Now, there's also been a surge in faith-based organization and value-based organizations. And speaking of which, there's been the formation of the ATM. Well, the ACTP has been around for quite a while. There's also the Women's Forum, and as well as, the ACDP and the Eco Forum as well, which calls itself as the Borderless and Non-Denominational Party. But I'm going to start with the Black First, Land First Party, which has been in the headlines for quite the, for some reasons, which I will not elucidate at this hour. A very good morning to you, and I'm speaking to Zanele Luana. She is the BLF Deputy President. A very good morning to you, and welcome to SABC.
Good morning to you and to the viewers as well.
I see, according to the scores that have been coming through, already 500,553 votes have been counted, and the BLF has scored 185. What's your impression of this?
We have trust in the will of our people. We have no doubt that we will get the necessary votes required for our movement to be represented in the National Assembly and in the legislatures in the provinces that we are contesting. So we are waiting, we are monitoring the trickling in of the results. We are quite excited. We can't wait for the new era in the South African politics, where a blacks-only movement that is uncompromising on what is it that black people need to be fighting for today, after for about 25 years where the lived experience of our people has not changed. We are landless, we are poor, we are unemployed, we do not have basic services, and more than 60% of the population lives in poverty. We believe as Black First, Land First, this is unacceptable, and we are going to do all that it is within our power to press on these issues when we are in Parliament, and to force black political parties to stop fighting over petty issues, and the issues of national importance should be resolved. And we need a clear timeline, we believe, on land expropriation without compensation. As black political parties, all of us combined, we will have two-thirds majority with no doubt. We should use the two-thirds majority to push for amendments, such as the ongoing process to amend the Section 25 of the Constitution. We are not going to allow for the selling out of our people, and that is why we are going there to Parliament, to not fight with the ANC or the EFF, to persuade them to adopt a radical agenda, while calling on white monopoly capital and their representatives in that parliament, such as Freedom Front Plus and Democratic Alliance, to account, to pay reparations to our people, to return the land, and so that we can take the economy.
I don't want to be talking about scores at this point, because it's still, the counting process is still at its infancy. It's still very, very early to be talking about such scores. But you talk about, achieving a two-thirds majority at the final outcome of the counting process. What gives you so much confidence? I mean, the BLF has been around for a couple of years now, and the kind of growth that has been seen by the BLF, I don't think is the kind of growth that you would have loved to see. What made you think that you'd be able to get a two-thirds majority?
Yeah, we believe in the quality of what is it that our movement represents. There is no doubt that the African National Congress still enjoys the majority support of the black majority in this country. And so are other parties such as the Economic Freedom Fighters. I believe new players in the game, such as our movement and ATM as well, are going to garner enough votes to unite the black bloc. And that is why we are not quite obsessed with the idea of competing with other political parties. We are interested in representation and how we can use whatever we get as a movement to push for a radical agenda.
Indeed, you talk of representation, but perhaps my question was, what makes you so confident that you'll be getting a two-thirds majority?
I think mentally our people, they have shifted so much. What has happened in terms of not improving the lives of our people has shifted the thinking of our people. there is a growing conversation on if politicians from the president to the ward councillor are not able to use the public services that they provide to the majority, why are we not compelling them by law to use them? So the thinking of our people has shifted. Our people do not look at politics now as something that will happen every 5 years. I think our people understand now that if we take our vote to the right places, we can be able to rescue the former liberation movements. And for years, since 1994, with betrayal and defeat, we believe a movement like Black First Land First will revive the national question, the African agenda. And that is why we have faith that not only as Black First Land First, with other political parties as well, we are going to be able to get the necessary representation and do what is needed in the country. We are not going to be, unfortunately, controlled by a party such as Democratic Alliance. Even if we head towards a coalition government, we should be able to suspend our differences, even within the Black political party bloc. And I am talking here about the likes of the African National Congress and the EFF. We will have the necessary vote. We must suspend all petty differences and put the plight of Black people at the forefront.
Deputy President, I wish we had all night to be talking about some of the policies of the BLF, but don't you think that some of the policies of the BLF, which the BLF has been known for, are deeply divisive in the South African political scene? I mean, just a short while ago, I spoke to the Freedom Front Plus, and they did allude to the fact that the BLF is actually in violation, its stance and its position on blackness, on the color of the skin, is actually in violation of the dictates of the Constitution. Don't you think this is costing you votes?
All we represent as Black First Land First is the interest of the Black majority. All we are saying as Black First Land First is that South Africa is a rich country. South Africa has enough land for all of us. It cannot be that representatives of colonizers and those who presided over apartheid can be taken serious on what they have to say about Black First Land First.
Well, being pro-black is one thing and being anti-white is another.
No, we want an equal society. That is what we want ultimately. But we must...
How can you be talking about wanting an equal society when you've made it very clear that you are anti-white?
No, white people want to join our political parties so that they can manipulate us, so that they can supervise us, so that they can buy our politicians, so that they betray the struggle of our people. All we are saying is Black First Land First. We can do it on our own. We will meet ahead there.
Well, I was actually reading into your statement that you want an equal society. How can you then want an equal society when one class of people in South Africa you look down upon?
The Freedom Front Plus, which advocates for a Boer African state, an Orania of South Africa, is okay with the fact that more than 60% of the population lives in poverty, that the Black majority is landless, that 9 million Black South Africans are unemployed. They are okay with the status of what it means to be Black in this country. And all we are saying as Black First Land First, that this is unacceptable in an African country, in a Black country, in a country that has a history of colonialism and apartheid. All we are saying is that let's go back to the drawing board, redress the historical injustices. Freedom Front Plus has not paid reparations, and it is only a movement such as Black First Land First that is going to force advocates of racism from DA to Freedom Front Plus to AfriForum to pay reparations, to take Black people serious, and to live on this country on terms and conditions set by the majority of this country.
Well, the economic freedom fighters has been advocating for the land reparation, as I've just put it, and advocating for that all Black people must have land, must retain their land, which is pretty much a central focus of what the BLF stands for. So, what makes you think that you'll be able to achieve a two-thirds majority, and what makes you think that you haven't been doing so well in that regard? Yet the EFF has been making headway.
There is a distinction that we must take into account. and that is the economic freedom fighters will talk left, but they will do right. And this is what we have seen, in fact, in 2016, where black people voted for EFF, but they took the votes to a white party such as the Democratic Alliance, which stands opposite against anything that the economic freedom fighters claim to be representing. So what this really means is that here is an energy of young people who had faith in a party that they thought could transform the lived experience of our people. They are just agents of white monopoly capital, we believe. And only a party like Black First Land First can put serious pressure on them to stop playing games about the lives of our people.
We don't have much time, unfortunately. Perhaps let me just rephrase. Hang on a second. Let me just rephrase the question. EFF is doing well insofar as the land is concerned. It has gained massive popularity and support. But the PLF has also been advocating for land, but it isn't doing that well.
Yes, the EFF is in parliament. The EFF and the ANC have the two-thirds majority. They could have amended the constitution. They could have amended the land expropriation bill that is sitting with the committee in the public works. They decided not to do that. They decided to prolong the process so that they can talk about land only to expropriate the votes of our people. Only through the presence of Black First Land First, we will force all these parties to suspend all these minor differences, to stop being bulldogs and lapdogs of white monopoly capital and do what is exactly expected when you say you are a black movement representing black people.
Zanele Luana, thank you so much for joining us. That was the Deputy President of the Black First Land First Party, BLF, Zanele Luana. And let's now move on to the Eco Forum. Well, it's one of the new players in the South African political scene. It's actually a Christian-based organization, and it advocates for a borderless society and a non-denominational society. First of all, let me ask the leader, Bafana Langa. Mr. Langa, very good morning to you and welcome.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
When you say the party advocates for a non-denominational and a borderless society, what do you mean by this?
No, we mean, you see, now when your approach is theocratic and there's going to be some kind of conclusions that we are a Christian party or movement. So we're not standing for a conservative or for sectarianism for a specific part of people, but we're dealing with humankind here. Our mandate is directive to the real government, which are the people of this nation. And that's why we say we don't need walls, we don't need demarcations, so we're breaking it all. But we understand that our fundamental principles are derivative from the Holy Scriptures. And that is period, because that's where creation is from. So if you can depict your material from the natural law, then I believe that South Africa can find, its direction, in order to build up not just a democratic, nation, but also theocratically have that approach in order to build this economy.
Let's talk about the complexities surrounding your very core objective. There is a thin line between Christianity and politics. Some may argue that, Christianity or the dictates or the values of the Bible or the Christian values may not deliver the basic services that South Africans so desperately need.
That's exactly what I'm trying to actually reiterate. And it has to be, articulated as such that when you talk Christianity, you are speaking groupings. Those are groupies. But I'm talking something which is so general. When you talk the Creator, you're talking about God who created us. As we sing Nkosi Sikelele, it means we know, all of us, that we are the creation of God, no matter how media can propagandize this matter. But we need to come to understand that now when we talk God, He is open. He is not going to come in the levels of being benedictional and say, no, we are just ministers of prayer. So we're not we're professionals. We're coming out, we want to put down documents, white papers, green papers, so we can also formulate policies in our nation so that we can also emerge and be part of this growth. Because, really, we gave birth to politics, you see, so we need not to forget that and find ourselves, meaning as a secular nation, and as we forget where we come from as a nation. South Africa was bred from prayer. breeded from people who stood behind and praying for those who were actually in exile. And for that reason, you need them in cooperation. You can't have an integrated government which actually is in the absence of a people of faith. So that's when we say we want to actually begin to re-establish the dignity of the people who were confined in some walls of churches. And now we are coming out to say the government, even of South Africa, cannot be centered only on a political spectrum. So we need a theocratic approach, and that would actually assist us, if I could put it, in a better way, it will assist us corporately to come together in order to actually bring South Africa to a place of national unity government, so that when we talk in terms of the morass of the nation, the moral generation of the nation, how do we actually build ourselves? So you can't find that in socialism or whether in communism. So you need to know that these things are found somewhere. So if we can respect one to another in how we approach things. But look, the government of EcoForum is not only about Christianity or maybe pushing that. If I am a believer, that gives me the right to stand in any platform, whether it's politics and whether it's business. So now,
Mr. Langa, just to interrupt you there, how do you convince a person who does not subscribe to the values of the Christian faith? How do you convince that person that you would deliver all the basic services that they need? I mean, there's rampant corruption in this country. There's alarming levels of unemployment and alarming levels of poverty. How would you convince that person that EcoForum would be able to deliver that person from all those social ills?
Okay, let me rectify this. I think it would be better for us to rectify. We're not a Christian party. That's why even when you look at our name, we are the Economic Emancipation Forum, EcoForum. So now our approach, as much as we are economical, we are theocratic. So now we will be able, as we stand in government, to even stand for any other person, because we said now our document speaks to humankind. So now, in other words, that now we understand that even a person who says I'm a non-believer or either way, whether I'm an atheist or anyhow, but now as long as you are attached to the ground, our principles will speak in line with technology, economies, agriculture. I mean, there are two businesses that we're given. The reason why we're having all the problems we have, I mean, you can even have a problem of rain in Western Cape. Why? Because South Africa is moving away from where it should actually depict, its complexion in terms of the enforcement of a good developing economy. So now that's where we want to bring them to say we were given agriculture and mining. Those were the two in the beginning. And every other thing that we can talk about now comes from the two. Why they are attached to the land is because now we needed to know who is the owner of the land. Not only us as coming say land and land. So EcoForum stands as a government. When we talk land, we talk diplomacy, we talk restitution, and then so forth, so that we can be understood as such, not just as people who are going to come in the parliament and pray. You understand? So we are policy makers, we lawgivers, and we definitely want to make change in the nation.
Let me come in there. The vote counting process is still at its infant stages. The EcoForum has already scored 136 votes. Are you at all convinced that your message has resonated with South Africans?
Most definitely, yes. We did, and as you said yourself, that counting of votes are still at an early stage. So we believe that in progression, we will definitely come up with a good number. So I mean, it's still early for anybody to predict any other thing. So we're sitting here to say to God, to see that all the work that we have done in order to write and register the government of EcoForum in the hearts of the people is fully done. So for now, I mean, there's nothing we can do. We're just waiting for the results to come in, and that's all. So for a party like ours, I mean, at our inception, you can look there. There are some parties there of people with a gigantic acumenship in terms of political spectrum, but they have not actually even arrived there. But we have. So we're confident enough to say,
Mr. Lang, unfortunately, we don't have all night. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Mandaluyah.
Mandaluyah. Well, that was Mr. Bafana Langa, beg your pardon. He is the leader of the Eco Forum, one of the new parties to be formed in South Africa. Now, he touched on a very contentious subject, that of Christianity vis-a-vis politics in South Africa. And there's another Christian party that I'm very, very interested to chat to with regards to the subject of Christianity and South African politics. That is the African Christian Democratic Party. And I'm joined by Mr. Brendan Gavinda. He is one of the officials of the party. Very good morning to Mr. Gavinda. Welcome.
Good morning.
The ACDP has already scored 7,089 votes. That must be something.
Yeah, well, if I'm looking at the results, at this time, we actually doubled percentage-wise from 2014. So, but if I'm looking at where the results have come in, our strong constituency results are still not yet in. I'm looking at the city of Cape Town, city of Johannesburg, city of Swane, where most of our voters sit. Those results are not yet in. So I'm expecting that the percentage will increase.
What makes you think that? What makes you so confident that it will increase this time around? And what is it that the ACDP did much better compared to 2014?
Well, let's look at our by-election results in the Western Cape. That's the first thing that we look at, is the results of the Western Cape. In the city of Cape Town, at the last by-election, we received 20% of the by-election results, which we've never received before. So people looked at us at a 1% party, but now with the by-election, we're getting just over 20%. And if that trend continues, we can really see that the sleeping giant of South Africa, which is the church, which makes up 79% of the population of South Africa, is suddenly waking up and saying, okay, let's look at where we're voting, how we're voting, and let's give the Christian party a chance.
I've just been in conversation with the leader of the Eco Forum. Well, that's a party which is advocating for for Christianity, you know. And I'm just curious to know as to where do you draw the line between politics and Christianity?
All right. So the one thing I want to say, let's not confuse the church and a political party. The African Christian Democratic Party is not a church, but we're a Christian party based on biblical principles. And we strongly believe that Christians must be involved in politics.
And I pose this question to Mr. Langa from the Eco Forum, and on behalf of the viewers, of course, as to what kind of services would a party based on Christian values would deliver. What is your view? What would your response to that be?
Well, we will deliver on a holistic approach. We would not only focus on just the Christian community. We believe that service delivery is for every citizen of South Africa. So when we take over government, we will provide services for every single citizen of South Africa.
Mr. Gavinda, thank you so much for joining us. That was Brendan Gavinda of the African Christian Democratic Party. And as I've mentioned, there's been a surge of values-based and, of course, Christian or faith-based political parties and organizations. And one of these is the Women's Forum. It's one of the newest parties to be formed. Let me chat to Me Lesego Mokone of the Women's Forum. A very good morning to you, Me. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Morning to your viewers.
The Women's Forum has already scored 181 votes. What's your impression of this?
They're actually quite interesting because when we looked at it, majority of those votes are not even in provinces where are on the ballot. They're not even in voting districts where a campaign was concentrated on. So it says the word got out. Even where we might have felt that we might not have reached an audience or a voter, but voters have come in. So in those provinces and areas that are still to come, it says results could become interesting in the next 24 hours to 48 hours.
Just how visible were you on the campaign trail?
We were highly visible in 6 of the 9 provinces where we had ground teams working. The Northwest was one, the Free State was one, KZN, in spite threats of violence within the KZN, knowing how volatile the province was, there was work done there. Gauteng, I think there was work done. And also with our LGBTQI communities, there was a very strong support base that came in out of that. And The interest in a woman-led party clearly says that politics in South Africa are about to become interesting. Yes.
Why women only?
We're not women only. We're women-led.
Okay, so that means men are also welcome to join the party.
We have already men as members of the party who are saying they will accede to a woman's leadership.
Let's interrogate further the mandate and the objective of the party. What is it that you stand for?
First and foremost, the women's agenda, the feminist agenda, to say South Africa could become better when women are put at the same level in those platforms, not relegated to leagues or chapters within political organizations, that when women, as the largest voting bloc, is able to take ownership of that and begin to set the agenda for the country, that our budgets are women-friendly, our public service, our public service takes women first in consideration, given the number of women who form the face of poverty in this country, who are the primary victims of violence in this country. How then do we not address the issues as urgent? Because women continue to keep the home fires burning. We may talk about it and say, and talk to struggle slogans, but in reality, we have failed these women. We have failed the heroines and the heroes of the struggles by not giving women priority in the country.
And I suppose that the formation of your party has come at a very right and opportune time in South Africa, when we've seen alarming levels of femicide and misogyny in South Africa. But I'm speaking as a devil's advocate. I'm speaking on behalf of taxpayers. I'm speaking on behalf of a broader base of South Africans who may not care exactly on what the other parties do, but all they care about is basic service delivery. What is it that you can do to deliver the necessary services in South Africa?
And women, already we have realized that within the first 100 days, should women forward, change the script, switch the script and take leadership in this country, we need to deliver on basic needs. In majority of the country, water, provision of just basic services, water on a regular basis, clean water needs to be addressed. The electricity issue, load shedding needs to be addressed. We're going into winter. Are we going in to see levels that we saw prior to the campaigns kicking off? So those are some of the basic. Khanyisa in the Northwest, they've been crying for something that should have been addressed more than 5 years ago. A road. What says is, are you telling me that in the infrastructure budget of the province, you failed to budget for a simple road? And it's not the first time. So for us, it's to say, within Women Forward coming into play, those are the basic necessities that need to be addressed. And remember, we've reverse gains found post-94 of where rent boycotts are becoming the norm. If you think about it, up to 2004, there was no issue of rate payments because we had reversed the legacy of rent boycotts that form part of the apartheid struggle. So why now, 10 years later, we're now back? We've taken 3 steps backwards. So those are some of the things we need to go back to and begin to address with South Africans and to begin to address with leadership, both at local government, because unfortunately we still have a 2-year until local government, so where we could begin to change, which is a primary service delivery vehicle.
We're not even halfway through the vote counting process. Just how hopeful are you that your fortunes might change at some point?
Extremely so. If you say we're not even halfway, we have not even yet begun to talk to the 80% of the voting districts where we know our party agents have been on the ground and have mobilized. Yes.
All right. Memukone, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. That was the leader of the Women's Forum, Me Lisego Mukone. And I suppose that we need to start celebrating the diversity of South African democracy. Every single South African now has a party that has an objective or a mandate that they can identify with, and cutting across a wide section of all the issues in society. Now, Arabile, back to you.
8.87% of votes counted thus far. Simpiwe will continue to check in on how the scenario looks, but we'll cross right back to Johannesburg now, where my colleague Flo Letwabo, of course, is standing by as we continue to get proceedings out of Auckland Park. We'll be back at The Rock a little bit later.
Right, thank you very much to you, Arabile, coming to us from The Rock alongside Simpiwe and Ngongwane, my team then for this morning as we count down till we go home in the next hour or so. All right, so as he said there, 8.87 of that national vote counted so far. So yeah, we are still quite far, aren't we? We can see here that the ANC sitting at 51.89% of that vote, the DA 29.44%, and the EFF at 6.94%. But of course, as I say, early days at this point. Let's take a short break. Do stay with us. We continue with our rolling coverage. I know that's our key phrase for today, but we will continue with that after the break. Do stay with us.
On Trains Travel, we bring you a full guide on all things lifestyle related. With so much to discover, we give you comprehensive reviews of places to visit, music, travel, and food. We also explore the arts, whether on or off stage. All this and more, be sure to tune into Trains Travel, Saturdays at 5:30 p.m. On Trains Travel, we bring you a full guide on all things lifestyle related. With so much to discover, we give you comprehensive reviews of places to visit, music, travel, and food. We also explore the arts, whether on or off stage. All this and more, be sure to tune into Trains Travel, Saturdays at 5:30 p.m.
We've seen that Brent crude oil rise about 30% this year alone.
Brent crude that's going steadily firmer speaks to a global economy that's in good shape. What we don't want to see are supply interruptions or sudden spikes.
The Bank of Athens has become Grow Bank. It plans to be a bank using digital and personable relations with its customers in the agricultural and food value chain space.
We're a lucky bank in that we are small. We're already working with artificial intelligence to allow us to manage our customer data.
Agriculture is a business. If we're going to take people, millions of them out of poverty, we've got to turn agriculture into a mega sector that works for everybody.
We're explorers. We always have been, endlessly curious, always looking for answers, for new frontiers, for new stories. Because that is who we are. From script to screen, from yelling action to taking you on a journey. Radio producers, script writers, on-air presenters, news reporters, sports analysts. We spend late nights creating captivating storylines and earlier mornings keeping you informed, educated, and entertained. For us, it's not a job, it's a calling. We do this and more because you do your part. SABC TV licenses, made possible by you.
right, it's 5 minutes past 4 o'clock this morning. If you've just joined us, a very good morning to you. And if you're back with us, thanks for staying with us. I'm Flo Ladwabo. We're coming to you live from Auckland Park in Johannesburg, Studio 11, with less than 10% of the votes counted. These are your top three parties at the moment. The ANC is hovering at 50%, the DA slightly above at 3%, and the EFF is at around 6%. But that's, of course, with only 8.87% of those votes counted so far. So early days indeed. All right, well, the Independent Electoral Commission is assuring South Africans about the overall integrity of the polls. This follows allegations of double voting in some areas. The Commission was briefing the media at the Results Operations Centre in Pretoria. IEC Commissioner Mosotho Meapea says there are several layers of security to prevent electoral fraud.
The layers of security include: 1, the voters' roll, which only allows registered voters to vote and only allows for a single registration per voter. 2, the requirement for voters to produce a valid ID document before they vote. 3, the scanning of ID documents prior to voting. 4, the marking of a voter's stamp with ink. May I say indelible ink. 5, the completion of a form containing the details of voters and the signing of a sworn declaration by voters where they vote at a voting station at which they are not registered. 6, party agents and observers monitoring all aspects of the voting, the counting, and the results capturing processes. 7, an inbuilt system-based exception report or reporting process for which various tolerance levels have been set. These exception reports are very well known to all of our political parties and the media as we provide these reports. And lastly, we capture these results and keep them on our systems in a scanned format where they can be recalled individually. All of these leave a detailed footprint of voter participation in the process and can be used both separately and in combination to identify instances of electoral fraud.
All right, so we're going to take you through some of those numbers coming in that have been updated so far. We're going to start with the National Assembly, so the general vote at the moment, and I think the screen will pop up for you in just a second. There it is. All right, so the ANC sitting at 51% there of those votes. The DA sitting at 30.4%. The EFF is at 6.7%, and the FF Plus sitting at 4.5%. That's on a 7.8% voting districts counted, and we're counting, of course, at a 63.4% voter turnout. We're going to move on then to the provinces then. I'll go to the ones that have been updated so far. The Eastern Cape is updated. Let's go there. The ANC, it's a staggering number, that is, hey, 71.9% so far there, 14.8% for the DA, 6% for the EFF, and 1.6% for the FF Plus. And then the other parties combined will be sitting at 5.7%, and that's a 13.1% voting districts counted so far at a 60% voter turnout, but that 71.9% is quite a huge margin, and I think the highest so far out of all the provinces. Could be corrected, but I think that is it. So 71.9% for the ANC in the Eastern Cape. Let's move on then to the Free State. The Free State, here's how the ANC is performing. 61.5%, the DA 18.5%, EFF 9.7%, FF plus 5.9%, and then the other parties combined at 4.4%, with the 9% voter districts counted thus far, and 62.5% voter turnout. And then, of course, where I am right now, Gauteng province. Let's take a look at those votes coming in at the moment. The ANC is at 49.7%. It's one of the provinces that the ANC and the DA sort of fight over, I suppose one could put it that way. The DA is sitting at 25.8%, EFF 12.6%, FF plus at 6.4%, and the other parties combined sitting at 5.5%, and that's at a 2.7% voter district counted thus far, so very little at this point. Of course, Gauteng will probably be one of the ones to trickle in very slowly. 73.3% voter turnout, Gauteng. So that's what we have going for you then. Let's move on then to the Northern Cape, where the ANC is sitting at 52.9% of the votes. So the DA 29.3%, FF plus 6.5%, EFF 5.9%, and the other parties sitting together at 5.4%. And that's based on a 32.5% voting districts counted and 67.8% voter turnout thus far. So that's what the Northern Cape is looking like at the moment. We're going to update and go to the Western Cape. There, a stronghold for the DA. They are sitting there at 58.1% of the votes. The ANC at 24.5%, FF plus 3.6%, and then the ACDP popping up there at 3.3%. The other parties together 10.6%, and that's based on 15.9% of the voter districts counted thus far at 64.3% voter turnout. So that's what those provinces are looking like at the moment. An update on the Eastern Cape, the Free State, Gauteng Province, Northern Cape, and the Western Cape. We'll, of course, give you the rest as we get some more updates. Of course, as you can imagine, we are sitting here with the results, and they keep trickling in, coming in, and we will keep you posted on what is happening at the moment. Right, 4 hours ago, the first results were released from a small voting station in the Eastern Cape. The ANC won the Mvomvo Lodge station in Umzimvubu region. Electoral officers counted a total of 11 votes for the 11% of the votes for the ANC out of 24. And the party's Deputy Secretary General, Jesse Duarte, spoke to us about this early victory.
This is just the opening of the door. We're very happy that we won this VD. It is in a stronghold of the ANC in Elfenzo region, so you know it's expected. But let's wait for tomorrow, and we're going to wait very patiently. But thank you very much, and we'd like to thank the voters in Mount Elif for giving the ANC back their confidence for now, and we'll see what happens tomorrow.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot more to come. Turnout is crucial. I know that the ANC, you have a very professional turnout operation. How did it run today?
It went well. Actually, better than we expected. And we believe that South Africans came out in their millions to vote. Hopefully, we'll see the results of that in terms of percentages. We were very impressed with Soweto, Tembisa. We were also very impressed with eThekwini and also various parts of Limpopo, as well as the Eastern Cape. So it looks like people came out to vote, and we're not going to guess a percentage, but you know, our statistics are quite accurate. It looks like between 69 to 70% turnout, but let's see what the experts say tomorrow morning.
All right, just a hunch. I mean, you talk about Soweto, you talk about Tembisa high turnouts. That will give you a strong chance of keeping Gauteng, if that's the case?
We think we will keep Gauteng. We're not going to make pronouncements. Let's wait. I mean, you know, we're patient. We're patient. We're waiting for the count. But we think we did fairly well.
stay with that story. The EFF won 8 votes out of a total of 24 in Mvomvo Lodge in the Umzimvubu region. The party's national spokesperson, Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, says it wants to challenge the dominance of the ANC.
It's really a vote that we don't take lightly. There are no strongholds anymore. That's not a word that can be associated anymore with South Africa's democratic politics, and that's because of the presence of the economic freedom fighters. I think it's going to be a neck-to-neck like that. We're taking them on. Every street, every VD, every ward, every region and every province, we're taking them on like that. But most importantly, we thank the people of South Africa, particularly those 11 voters there in Umzimvubu, for giving it to the EFF.
All right, lots of conversations around turnout. Does a high turnout help you or hurt you? I mean, various people have various views on this. Some of the political sort of analysts I've spoken to, some of the people who are much better at maths than I am, suggest that, you know, a high turnout helps a governing party. Some people say it actually goes the other way. How do you see it?
I don't know that there is supporting evidence for this conceptualization, because the average turnout of votes in South Africa is 74, 73, 71 in the past 6 elections, at least national and provincial elections. And then 2016, the turnout was 58%, and in the local government elections before that, it was 55%. It didn't work for the ANC. I'm not sure where that theory comes from. It could be one of those either media incompetence in properly conceptualizing issues in public discourse, or just ANC propaganda. 71, 72, 73% is an average turnout. We haven't been in an 86% that was in 1994. And if you go there, the ANC didn't have about 2 provinces. So I'm not sure where that theory comes from. What I do understand is that the full force of South Africans came out, and that is good for democracy. That is good for the type of neck-to-neck that we are going to eat a lot, particularly in areas like rural Eastern Cape, rural Kwazulu-Natal. With a stronghold, and we've entered that space. There's no stronghold for the ANC anymore. Those days are gone.
Interesting there that the EFF's national spokesperson, Mbuyiseni, they're saying that there are no strongholds anymore. Hey, interesting, because we've always sort of used that terminology. We'll see about that. Right, we're going to take a short break, and after the break, we're going to catch up with Kwazulu-Natal and cross to the IEC Centre in Durban with Ayanda Mhlongo. She'll be giving us an update of what's happening there in KZN. So do stay with us. After the break, more news and, of course, more of that coverage of the elections live, coming to you live from the IEC Centre in Pretoria, as well as here in Joburg and throughout our provinces. Stay with us.
We're explorers. We always have been, endlessly curious, always looking for answers, for new frontiers, for new stories. Because that is who we are. From script to screen, from yelling action to taking you on a journey. Radio producers, script writers, on-air presenters, news reporters, sports analysts. We spend late nights creating captivating storylines and earlier mornings keeping you informed, educated, and entertained. For us, it's not a job, it's a calling. We do this and more because you do your part. SABC TV licenses, made possible by you.
25 years ago, it was a vote for hope, for a new nation. It was about rejoining the global family. This time, it's about bread and butter issues, about corruption, jobs, societal ills, and social cohesion. Then and now, always there, when South Africa decides.
All right, exactly 20 minutes past 4, and of course we're giving you that 24/7 coverage of what's going on this week when it comes to the elections 2019. As I said just before the break, we are going to catch up with Kwazulu-Natal and find out what's going on there, where about 100 voting stations suffered delays, mainly due to service delivery protests. 6 people were arrested after roads were blocked on Wednesday. Well, our SABC reporter Ayanda Mhlongo at the Provincial ROC Rock Centre in Durban. She joins us live there now. Good morning to you, Ayanda. Well, tell us what's happening then in KZN, specifically Durban. There had been some protests. Has that really affected voter turnout and everything going on around the elections? Take us through what's going on.
All right, good morning to you, Flo, and good morning to our viewers at home. Well, certainly quite a busy day. If we look back at yesterday at voting day, both IEC and law enforcement agencies having had their hands full, as you know, many voting stations in the province of KwaZulu-Natal early on in the morning, as around 100, we were told, were unable to start on time because of the demonstrations that took place. Most of them, in fact, taking place here in the eThekwini Metro and other areas in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. And unfortunately, in some areas, as we reported late last night, that in the Ukahlamba area, 4 voting stations there were unable, although they did open eventually at around 4 p.m. in the afternoon, but voters in that area deciding not to vote. So as we understand, not a single person voted in Ukahlamba's Ward 15. Yesterday, which had about a population of about 4,000, we are told. So they were expecting about 4,000 people who had registered in that particular area. And it's not the only one. We also hear that down in the south, in the area of Mdoni, again, service delivery protests there, but resulting again in communities boycotting yesterday's vote. Of course, the challenges are here and there. Other stuff that we picked up yesterday was a delay in material. Some of the political parties that we were chatting to later on in the afternoon, saying that they were a bit upset that people had to wait quite a long time for additional ballot papers to be delivered to the respective voting stations. But coming back to here, it's been an incredibly long night for the political parties here as they anxiously await the results as they start to trickle in. Of course, it's still a very early flow at this moment. And I've just been looking at the board here with the results coming in slowly from KwaZulu-Natal. Of course, we have around 5.1 million registered voters here in the province, and with some people choosing not to vote yesterday, we'll still have to wait quite a while to get those numbers. But I've just been seeing that the ANC is already in the lead so far. But as I said, the results are still very, very early. Still, the first results that are trickling in, and so this picture is going to change throughout the course of the day. But it's about 23,000 in just a few seconds, growing to 27,000, I beg your pardon, the IFP, DA, and then the EFF in terms of the parties that have already seem to be getting most of those votes. But as I said, it's still very early, and that could change throughout the course of the day. The political parties are here. They've been here throughout the night, and they will continuously monitor the results as they come through. Of course, the results will be going to the 44 districts. They're counted at the voting stations. Then they are captured in the districts. And here, the IEC officials that we see here, this is the center for the eThekwini result. Of course, we'll be getting the provincial results as well. But here, these are the results that are being tallied, those that are coming in just from the eThekwini district. So it's still a long day ahead for the political parties. And suppose it's going to be interesting. And later on, we'll be getting into our analysis. We'll also be joined by our political analysts just to take us through as we unpack these results as they come through. Flo.
Right, great work, Ayanda. Thank you very much. We'll be, of course, getting back to her and getting more updates from Durban, KZN. Let's cross over now to Pretoria, of course, where Arabile Gumede and Simpueng Ngongwane have been keeping me company from the Rock in Pretoria, the IEC Centre there. Let's hear what is going on there. Arabile, what do you have for us?
Of course, at the Rock here, that's the Regional Operations Center, of course, here in Pretoria. Of course, the scenario, of course, the situation. can tell things perhaps beginning to trickle in and start all over again this morning. We are beginning to see sentiment and the cause of things and just where things are beginning to head towards. When one takes a look at the voting scenario there, Flo, we're almost at 10% this morning when it comes to that national vote. The picture is beginning to take effect as well there, and we are beginning to find out the scenarios as to what exactly is going to happen in certain regions and certain areas there as well. Just quickly looking in on how things are flowing as well, particularly now in the Northern Cape very quickly. 37.34% of the vote has been counted there. 707 voting districts, so 264 have been counted. The ANC still maintaining their majority there at 53.62% with regards to support. 28.19% for the DA and the EFF sitting at 6.78. Let's continue to check in as well on just some of the other regions as well. Out in the Eastern Cape as well, 16.5% of the votes have been counted on that front there as well. 72.57% going out to the ANC there, with the DA taking in 14.3. Voter turnout in the Eastern Cape has been at around 60% thus far, with spoiled votes sitting at just over 3,000 as well. So as you can tell then, that picture is one that may not necessarily stay that way, but it does tell you exactly how things are faring and shaping up at present, considering where we are in that voting cycle. Overall, as you can see, the EFF getting a 7.18% support rating on the National Assembly as well. The DA sitting at 28.73, which would be a real heavy improvement, but a whole lot of counting is still to come. On the National Assembly front, we still have 10.5% of votes having been counted at present. So it is quite interesting to get into that picture, exactly how things are faring on the on the National Assembly front. You have 64.17% of voter turnout there. 11,875 ballots have been spoiled. Now, if the figure does stay at 64.17 with regards to voter turnout across the country, that brings that figure even lower, below 20 million voters having put through their votes as well. If we go through to that national results board as well, here at the ROC, the Rock here in Pretoria, of course, you begin to see the numbers coming in there. The ANC sitting at 465,546 votes nationally then. The DA sitting, of course, still in second place there, 255,055 with regard to those votes. The EFF languishing in third, 63,728, but the Freedom Front Plus there at 36,881. That board perhaps telling a picture there. The likes of Azapo there, 413 votes as well. Then Cope, look at that, 3,809 votes there as well, still making headway. And the Good Party, Patricia de Lille's party there, she's led with regards to leadership on that front. She's gotten 8,769 votes for the Good Party then. Of course, one of the newest entrants to the political arena here in South Africa. The UDM there with their leader Bantu Holomisa, 4,423 votes thus far, just checking in on the board. The IFP as well, 9,133 with regards to the number of votes having received on the national front. The race for those votes does continue, and we'll continue to unpack it for you, right? We'll continue to give you some sentiment and just how things are faring. We'll continue to get updates as well, not just right now, but across the morning as well. And hopefully the IEC will join us a little bit later on as well to unpack exactly what has happened thus far, as my colleagues as well begin to awaken from their slumber and get to grips with things here at the Rock in Pretoria. Let's quickly check in on Mpumalanga very quickly as well. 11.12% of votes have been counted on that front there. The voting districts, 1,772, and as you can see, the ANC, they're getting a majority of 63.36%, 15.45% for the DA, and the EFF sitting just above that 10% mark. So some keen numbers coming through on that front. One that we perhaps will be looking towards for hot contestation exactly the province of Gauteng, only 4.6% has been counted for them on that front. The ANC thus far maintaining 52.43% of the votes there. But as you can tell, of course, very few of the entire part of Gauteng has actually been counted sufficiently, and you can't really get a full number as to how things are faring exactly right now. All right, well, this is the scenario here, of course, at The Rock. We have over 22,000, so we say, voting districts and voting centers, polling centers across the country, which, of course, detail exactly how the scenario has fared. We continue to get some of the results throughout the province. It is going to be difficult to ascertain. So the three metros that perhaps the ANC will be keenly worried about, of course, are those of Tshwane, Johannesburg, and of course the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan Bay. How things fare on those fronts will be keenly contested for them. Have they made enough inroads, or have the likes of the DA and the EFF perhaps set up the right notions to keep themselves in power in certain factions in certain parts of the country there? How difficult will it be to maintain certain segments, parts of South Africa for the likes of the ANC? It is one that I think some may even have said that despite the voter turnout, of course, whatever the number is, it still does give some sentiment with regards to how strong the voting in itself has been in terms of support for the likes of the ANC, the DA, and even the EFF there as well. So those seem to be the front runners at present, but of course in certain areas things change along, and we'll continue to get exactly how things are faring thus far. As usual, though, my colleague Simphiwe Ngongwana is standing by on the floor here at the Results Operations Center in Pretoria. Simphiwe, I'll cross over to you now. You're still speaking to those political parties on the floor. Exactly what do you have for us now?
All right, Arabila, thank you so much. Indeed, I'm coming from the floor of the Rock at the IEC in Pretoria. It is almost 5 a.m. It is a dawn. It is a new day. But what is not clear is, would it be a new dawn for some of the political parties contesting power in the 2019 general elections? Well, we'll definitely find out either on Saturday or on Sunday when the announcement will be made. But let's quickly chat to some of the parties that have been contesting this year's election. I'm going to start with the African Security Congress, and I'm joined by Mr. Tebogo Saidi. A very good morning to you, Mr. Saidi. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Hey, thank you, man. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? How are we faring so far?
Hey, but we are not doing bad. See, we have not reached the million mark as yet. And as a new kid on the block, we are standing our ground and doing partially very well. You know, considered all the facts, we are actually not doing that badly. But we are still standing. Let's see how the board goes. At least let's start talking again after 6 o'clock and see how the votes are coming.
Yeah, it's still too early. It's still too early to say. I mean, it's 887,867 votes have been counted so far. As a new kid in the block, what is it that you stand for?
We are a sectoral organization. We represent security officers. And we have made it very clear that we want to see a better life for them. You know, the industry has been forgotten. These people are earning peanuts, and their kids, are unable to even go attend better schools. They are living in squalors and everything else. And we want to see their life a little bit changing, having, they need to at least earn a better salaries, be able to afford proper housings, be able to feed their families. And that is what basically we are fighting for. If we can achieve that and be able to represent them within the legislative frameworks of this country, we will be able to better their lives. And that is our major goal.
So how has voting been so far, and what kind of challenges did you face?
You know, as much as we know that the big organizations have been bullying us everywhere, we do not have many resources as they do, and the campaigning has not been that much fair for small organizations. But we cannot complain. Unfortunately, it's everybody's game. So we have learned our lessons. We will do better next time, and we will be able to understand the name of the game better in the future.
Okay, so are you at all confident that things will change?
I am. You know, as I'm saying, you can look at the board. So we are not doing that badly for somebody who's new, somebody who did not have that much resources to campaign. You know, at least the people that we represent have understood our message, and they are actually showing that they understand exactly what we stand for and what we want to represent. So they have given us their votes. The only thing that we can sit and hope for is that come tomorrow, this time around, we'll be talking a different language.
So next time, for those who may not buy into you, your vision for now, for this year's election, what is it that you're going to do differently in order to entice and attract them to your party?
We started our campaign very late. And as I'm saying, you know, we do not have much resources. The thing that we can do differently is to try and reach as many people as we possibly can. As I said, we are a sectoral organization. We will then just need to make sure that we go directly to where they are. Because, you know, security officers are people that work 12 hours a day. They are not around every time. We cannot do door-to-doors to get hold of them. So we just need to understand where they are better in order for us to make sure that they get our message there.
Mr. Saidi, all the best. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to ask you to step aside so I could have a conversation now with Mr. SABC, who is the Acting Secretary General of the National Freedom Party. Well, it's safe to say that is actually the offshoot of the Inkatha Freedom Party. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Well, thanks. How are you?
Good. How are you? How are you faring? How are you doing so far?
Well, I think we are trying, and definitely we will get there. We are working towards getting 10 seats in our National Assembly, and hopefully we'll make it to that target that we have set for ourselves.
Yeah, I see that the NFP has already scored 1,040 votes nationally, and in Kwazulu-Natal, the NFP, let me have a look at that. In the Kwazulu-Natal province, you have scored 565. Are you at all happy?
No, just rest assured, we are coming. So when you see these KwaZulu-Natal results, most of our stronghold areas have not yet shown up. So once they come up, you will see the number, then will come up and will increase automatically. Even the national will come up.
Do you think that what has been happening within the NFP contributed to the low voter turnout, and as well as the kind of results that we see on the board right now? I know it's still too early to say, but if we just look at the margin between the other parties in KwaZulu-Natal, for instance.
Yeah, we can have that 2016 factor, but we have just put that aside. It is just bridge under water. I mean, it is water under bridge, so we are survivors, then I'm sure we'll make it. Although there were some problems, even the financial constraints, but we have tried very hard to come up and do our campaigns. So during our campaigns, we've tried very much to convince our supporters that we are back now. We have tried to solve all those problems that have been with us for quite some long time. We are strong, we are back, and we are saying this is a payback period. We are preparing for 2021. We'll be very strong.
And I do understand that there's been talks or negotiations over succession within the party. Can you confirm those?
Well, I'm not sure about those talks because I'm standing with you now, our president will still stand as a president, and then the other NEC members will decide who is coming or who is the deputy, who's the chairperson, and all other positions. But for now, as per our constitution, the president will still stand as our president. She will not be contested.
Are you at all threatened by the dominance of the ANC, maybe the IFP perhaps?
No, we are not at all. We are not threatened.
What is it that you're going to do differently? What is it that you have promised to your voters?
Well, we are going to be the mouthpiece of those who cannot talk. We are going to defend the poor of the poorest. So our advocates will be we'll be looking at the rural development. We'll fight for those people from rural areas and those who are living in townships who have been neglected for all, for all this time.
Mr. SABC, thank you so much for joining us. That is the Acting Secretary General of the National Freedom Party, the NFP, Mr. Mzwakhe SABC. All right, Arabile, it's now back to you.
Yeah, my colleague Simpiwe Ngongwana there, of course, on the floor here at the Results Operations Center in Pretoria, of course. I am still joined by my guest, Dr. Pravesh Deva and Michael O'Donovan, political analyst, as we perhaps wrap things up here at The Rock for this time being in the graveyard shift, shall we call it that. Michael, just perhaps getting your sentiments. Things thus far have sort of seemingly gone, I suppose, gone according to plan?
Pretty much. I mean, there have been no big surprises. There's been no tectonic plates shifting here. No, none of the small parties have suddenly come up with a two-thirds majority, as they may have hoped. So it's pretty much as...
So you expect it to be like this? You expect the ANC, the DA and the EFF to perhaps maintain that stronghold, despite it being this early, just over 10.5%?
No, absolutely. They would continue to do so. And then we really start getting into the detail, what's happening in the provinces. And that is going to be the really interesting stuff.
Dr. Pravesh Deva from the CSIR as well. Perhaps some thoughts and some data points you're seeing come out as well. What is it that you can share?
With regards to the provinces, as I mentioned, for the Western Cape, the ANC is likely to be a majority, but it also seems that the percentage for the ANC is going to decrease. In a similar way for sorry, that was for the Northern Cape. Yes, sorry. In a similar way for the Western Cape, the DA is expected to be the ruling party there, and they also expected to have a decrease in the proportions as well.
Dr. Deba, I'm just going to go quickly to the board behind us, of course, the massive board that details some of the provinces there. And in the Western Cape thus far, what's that, 186,468, I think. Wow, my eyes are that good. Certainly getting the votes there for the Democratic Alliance, with the ANC sitting in second place there at around 67,000 votes on that front. It will be quite interesting. Those are the kinds of provinces that are perhaps hotly contested. We move on over as well to the Eastern Cape, where you will see quite a few people as well. 162,273 votes there for the ANC. The DA sitting there with 33,070 votes. And Gauteng, yeah, that's going to be a hotly contested one too. The ANC, 53,944 votes, while the DA has 26,515. The EFF coming in there third at 14,445. So nearly 1 million votes have been counted thus far. It's just over 10.5% with regards to voting and that scenario here thus far. So this is the heart and the hub of where the results will be, of course, broadcast. We'll continue to give you an update live from this Results Operations Center here in Pretoria. From me, however, it is goodbye, and from my guests as well, Dr. Pravesh Deba and Michael O'Donovan. Really appreciate your time this morning, gentlemen, as well. Thank you so much for that. We do cross over, however, to Johannesburg, where my colleague Flo Letwaba is standing by as well to say goodbye. Flo, it is time to perhaps catch a bit of slumber before we get more of those results. Over to you.
Yeah, Arabila, I heard you say something about a graveyard shift. Let me tell you something. During elections, there is no graveyard shift. Everything is prime. You're on prime right now, but catch some sleep, my friend. Have a good time, have some good sleep, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Thank you very much for that wonderful broadcasting from The Rock in Pretoria. That's Simpiwe Ngongwana as well as Arabile Kumete keeping me company there this morning. So they're wrapping up, and we'll be shortly making way for the morning live team. I'm also going to be saying goodbye to you shortly. All right, let's take a look at those provinces that we hadn't looked at before. They will pop up on your screen right now. All right, so we're starting off with KZN then. Yep, the ANC sitting at 59.4% of the vote so far. The IFP sitting at 15.5%. The DA coming in close to the IFP there with 13.7%. Then you have the EFF with 6.7%. And that's based on a 2.7% voter district counted and 66.7% voter turnout. So, of course, early days. All right, let's move on to the next province. We're going to Limpopo then. The ANC, I know that the EFF national spokesperson, Buyiseni, said there's no such a thing as a stronghold, but well, you look at what the ANC is doing there in Limpopo, sitting at 65.3%, the DA 13.4%, EFF at 9.9% of the votes there in Limpopo. I do imagine there will be a swap there in terms of the EFF coming in second once more votes are counted there in Limpopo. FF Plus then sitting at 8.2%, and the other parties combined 3.2%. That's at based on a 3% voter districts counted so far, 58.6% voter turnout. That's what's happening in Limpopo. Right, let's check the next province then. We're going to check Mpumalanga, and Mpumalanga is looking like this. ANC 63.5% so far, DA 15.4%. Then we've got the EFF coming in there at 9.9%, the FF Plus 6.4%, and then the other parties combined at 4.8%. That's based on a 10.4% voter districts counted so far, 67.6% voter turnout there in Mpumalanga. So that's what Mpumalanga is looking like at the moment. And then we're going to take a look at the Northwest. There, the ANC is at 59.8%, EFF 14.1%, the DA at 13.6%, FF Plus 8.8%, and the other parties combined are sitting at 3.7%. That's based on 11.9% voter districts counted thus far, 56.3% voter turnout in the Northwest. Okay, and then of course what everybody is mainly interested in would be the national results so far. We've only at 10% of the voter districts counted, but let's take a look at how the parties are faring so far. ANC 52.3%, DA 29%, EFF 7.1%, FF Plus 4.2%, and the other parties combined sitting at 7.4%. The voter turnout there pretty good at 64.1%. So that's what the National Assembly votes are looking like so far. All right, and that's it from me for this morning. We hand over to the Morning Live team. Please do stay with SABC. We will be continuing to give you the latest updates on the elections, and of course those results. We're the best channel to be with for the elections, so do stay with us. All right, your weather's coming up next. From me, Flo Ladorba, take care. Have yourself a lovely day. Cheerio.
Welcome to the weather desk. Let's take a look at the weather conditions expected for tonight and tomorrow. For tonight, we have a cold front over the eastern parts of South Africa, bringing in some isolated to scattered showers and thunder showers over the central and the eastern parts of the country. We also have a cold front making its way over the western province, bringing some isolated to scattered showers and rain along the southwest coast into the adjacent interior for tonight. Tomorrow, we start to see some clearing with isolated showers and rain mainly over the escarpment of Limpopo and Mpumalanga, also going into places of Kwazulu-Natal. Morning fog patches can also be expected over that eastern escarpment as well as along the west coast for tomorrow. Otherwise, the western and the central interior can see some clear skies for tomorrow, where temperatures are expected to be cool. But taking a look at our temperatures, we're expecting cool temperatures in the Gauteng province, with Johannesburg and Springs both at a maximum of 23 degrees. Warmer up north, with Pretoria reaching a maximum of 24 degrees. Some morning fog patches are expected with isolated showers and thunder showers over the escarpment, with Palabora hot tomorrow with a maximum of 32 degrees. Warmer temperatures in the central interior, Polokwane at 27 degrees, with Tabazimbi peaking at a maximum of 28 degrees. Some cool temperatures expected in Mpumalanga, with some isolated showers and thunder showers over the escarpment. Ermelo 21 degrees, with Carolina peaking at a maximum of 23 degrees. Emalahleni will be warm tomorrow with a maximum of 26 degrees. Hot in the Lowveld, with Skukuza peaking peaking at a maximum of 32 degrees. Some cool temperatures expected in KwaZulu-Natal with that passage of the cold front, with Richards Bay at 25 degrees. eThekwini will see a maximum of 23 degrees. Very cold temperatures there over the southern parts, with Kokstad reaching a maximum of only 16 degrees. Again, some cool temperatures expected in the Eastern Cape. Mthatha at 19 degrees, with King Williamstown also seeing a maximum of 19 degrees. Very cold in Komani tomorrow with a maximum of 17 degrees. Mostly clear skies in Port Elizabeth with partly cloudy conditions at first, with a maximum of 22 degrees. The Western Cape also seeing some cool temperatures behind that cold front. Beaufort West at 20 degrees, with Laingsburg reaching a maximum of 21 degrees. The mother city will also be cool tomorrow with a maximum of 21 degrees. Up north, we start to see some cooler temperatures, warm in Vredendal tomorrow with a maximum of 25 degrees. Again, some cool temperatures in the Northern Cape. Kuruman at 20 degrees, with Kimberley also peaking at a maximum of 20 degrees. Warmer up north, with Uppington reaching a maximum of 23 degrees, with Sutherland at a maximum of 24 degrees. In the Free State, also some cool temperatures are expected. Vicksburg at only 18 degrees, with Bloemfontein seeing a maximum of 19 degrees. Warmer temperatures there in Sasolburg tomorrow with a maximum of 22 degrees. And lastly, in the northwest, again some cool temperatures are expected, but warm temperatures there in the east, with Rustenburg at 25 degrees and Mahikeng peaking at a maximum of 24 degrees. Cooler temperatures there in the south and the southern parts. Ottosdal at 22 degrees, with Bloemhof peaking at a maximum of 20 degrees.
Hello, I'm Nana, and I want to tell you a bit about Economics Unbound.